Chapter 22:15, One-Star Genius. This was only a branch of the Radiant Saint Hall. The people responsible for recording down the new disciples were a few women in white clothes with a special badge from the Radiant Saint Hall. The women did not seem old. From their appearances alone, the youngest seemed to be 16 or 17, while the oldest were only in their early 20s. They were all pretty, which was pleasant to the eye. Of course, who knows how long they had actually cultivated for already. This is a testing medallion. Record the information about your identity onto your testing medallion, and then go get tested with the medallion. The person who received Jian Chen was a young woman who seemed to be 17 or 18. She took out a medallion that was 3 fingers wide with great familiarity and passed it to Jian Chen. The medallion was created from jade. Not only was it tough, but it could also store information. Things could be recorded in there through the soul. Jian Chen took his medallion and directly made his way to the testing grounds. When he arrived at the testing grounds, over 100 Radiant Saint Masters were already scattered there. They were either nervous and unsettled or waiting eagerly as they rubbed their hands. They all looked at a white, jade pillar up ahead with varying gazes. The jade pillar was 100 feet high and as thick as a water tank. It was covered with inscriptions. Who knew how many formations were engraved on it? The jade pillar seemed like just a supporting body for the formations. The jade pillar was especially used to test the talent of Radiant Saint Masters. This was an important process that all people who wanted to join the Radiant Saint Hall had to go through. It had a direct correlation to their future. This was because greater talent discovered through the tests meant that the status enjoyed after joining the Radiant Saint Hall would be greater as well. A good starting point meant more room for growth in the future. Jiang Cheng, mid-grade talent; Phineas, low-grade talent; Dracula, low-grade talent; Xian Jiang, high-grade talent. As the white pillar constantly flickered with a light of varying brightness, the old man responsible for the testing constantly called out their level of talent. Jian Chen discovered from close observation that lighting up 30 feet or less of the pillar was low-grade talent, while beyond that was mid-grade talent. If someone could exceed 60 feet, it would be high-grade talent. Most of the people here possessed low or mid-grade talent. Very few of the people present had high-grade talent. But at this moment, the white pillar suddenly began to shine with blinding light. The dazzling light on the pillar reached 9 feet in a single instance before rising by another foot before stopping. In the end, the light stopped at 91 feet, and it no longer shone with just white. It had become multicolored. A one-star genius. It's actually a female genius, cries immediately rang out. The people gathered there all showed envy. Jian Chen also looked over and discovered a pretty woman who seemed to be in her 20s standing before the white pillar. Her facial features were delicate, and she was beautiful. Her large, onyx-like eyes blinked constantly as if they were trying to say something. She wore white robes, which indicated that she was a Radiant Saint Master. She looked at the top of the white pillar, at the light that had only reached 91 feet. She frowned slightly as if she was rather dissatisfied with the result. Biyao, one-star genius. The old man who was responsible for the testing finally smiled. He nodded at Biyao amiably and said, "Biyao, congratulations. From today onwards, you are a one-star genius of our Radiant Saint Hall." Afterwards, Biyao was taken away by an envoy in black clothes. As long as a prodigious talent was found, even if they were only the lower, one-star geniuses, their treatment would differ drastically from ordinary disciples. Ordinary disciples, even those with high-grade talent, all had to wait here after the testing. Only star geniuses would be immediately taken to the Radiant Saint Hall by envoys. Afterwards, the testing continued. After testing over a dozen people, the white pillar finally shone brightly once again. The intense white light rose even faster than when Biyao was being tested. It basically reached a height of 90 feet in a single instance, turning it multicolored. The light did not just stop at 91 feet like during Biyao's testing. It passed 91 feet very soon and approached the 92nd feet. In the end, the colorful light stopped at 95 feet. It was close to the 96th feet. A 5-star genius. It's actually a 5-star genius. This time, the old man could not help but cry out in excitement. Whether it was the ordinary disciples waiting to one side or the radiant Saint Masters waiting to be tested, they all looked at the 5-star genius with envy. There were even quite a few women among them who revealed great, undisguised admiration. Even Jian Chen could not help but glance over curiously. It was an extremely handsome young man around the same age as him. He had already lifted his hand away from the jade pillar, and he stood confidently with his hands behind his back. He was proud of himself. Zhuofeng, 5-star genius. After sucking in a deep breath, the old man announced excitedly. Afterwards, another black-clothed envoy took Zhuofeng away extremely politely. A while later after Zhuofeng, it was finally Jian Chen's turn. Jian Chen walked over eagerly. He passed his medallion to the old man and looked at the white pillar calmly. You're called Changyang, right? Place your hand on the testing stone, and then condense radiant saint force with all your efforts. You don't need to worry about your class as a radiant saint master affecting the testing stone. The testing stone only tests a person's talent. It has nothing to do with one's cultivation level, explained the old man. Thank you for telling me, senior. Junior understands. Jian Chen clasped his fist at the old man before looking at the white pillar. After a period of silence, he gently pressed his hand onto the jade pillar and began to condense radiant saint force slowly. Immediately, white light began to rise up from the base of the pillar. It did not move very quickly. Instead, it advanced at an extremely steady pace. It passed by 30 feet and 60 feet very soon. In the end, the radiant saint force Jian Chen had condensed made the light reach 91 feet. A 1-star genius should be about enough. Jian Chen paid attention to the light on the pillar at all times. After stabilizing it at 91 feet, he acted like he was out of power and stopped. This was not Jian Chen's limit. He had purposefully suppressed himself during the testing and stopped after reaching the level of a 1-star genius. He understood that his identity was sensitive, so he could not simply show off in the Radiant Saint Hall and attract too much attention. He only needed to establish an identity that was enough to cultivate in the Radiant Saint Hall. The identity of a 1-star genius just happened to be around average in the Radiant Saint Hall. It could fulfill his needs without attracting too much attention. Changyang, 1-star genius, the old man announced in high spirits. He had discovered 3-star genius in a single stroke. It was quite the merit for him. Afterwards, Jian Chen was also taken away by a black-clothed envoy to the Radiant Saint Hall. Chapter 22:16. One-colored soul core. A layer of milky white light from the envoy surrounded Jian Chen. Afterwards, he was taken away from the city at the envoy's full speed, which also happened to be extremely slow in Jian Chen's eyes. The black-clothed envoy was clearly a hallowed saint master. He was cool, expressionless, and silent. He did not talk to Jian Chen at all, only focusing on the journey. Jian Chen said nothing as well. He had closed his eyes now, silently sensing the envoy's usage and grasp over radiant saint force to comprehend the wonders within it. The envoy's cultivation was only equivalent to an early over-god. In the eyes of someone who could kill primordial realm experts like Jian Chen, such cultivation was basically as insignificant as an ant. However, the envoy's achievements with radiant saint force could not be compared to Jian Chen's, who had only reached class 9 as a radiant saint master. As a result, Jian Chen had many things he could learn from the envoy. Very soon, Jian Chen completely submerged himself in the comprehension of radiant saint force. He was an expert who could fight someone at the primordial realm after all, so he possessed a rich foundation. His radiant saint force remained at class 9 and never broke through because he never found a path to continue. Now, he was able to comprehend the envoy's usage of radiant saint force at such proximity, so it was like seeing a lighthouse within the dark night. He instantly found his path. Suddenly, dazzling, milky white light flickered around Jian Chen. The light shone brighter and brighter, becoming like the sun in the sky. It enveloped Jian Chen completely. At the same time, strands of extremely pure radiant saint force and origin energy gathered in from all directions, forming a swirl of energy that only radiant saint masters could sense above Jian Chen's head. Like a whale taking in water, he completely absorbed all the radiant saint force and origin energy that gathered above him. The soul core in Jian Chen's head that had been completely condensed from radiant saint force and origin energy, representing him as a Class 9 radiant saint master, revolved rapidly. It grew at a terrifying rate, undergoing a qualitative transformation. In the end, the pure white soul core became scarlet. It hovered in Jian Chen's head quietly as it shone with faint red light. It seemed like a scarlet flower. You've actually broken through at a time like this. It looks like your talent is pretty impressive. The envoy glanced at Jian Chen and sighed in surprise. But clearly, even when Jian Chen broke through, his strength was still on a completely different level compared to the envoy's. As a result, his breakthrough did not raise too much of the envoy's attention. The question was, would the envoy still be able to remain as composed as he was right now when he found out Jian Chen that was an expert who could kill primordial realm experts? The 7 colors of the soul core are equivalent to the 3 levels of the origin realm and the 4 levels of godhood. My soul core is scarlet right now, which means I've formally advanced from Class 9 to Class 10 as a Radiant Saint Master, thought Jian Chen. He had never thought he would make a breakthrough before he had even arrived at the Radiant Saint Master. Moreover, he had broken through without a cultivation method, finding his direction completely through the envoy's usage of Radiant Saint Force. He could not help but become eager. He had no idea what impressive cultivation method he could obtain from the Radiant Saint Hall and how his cultivation as a Radiant Saint Force would advance at an astonishing rate. After all, he was different from others. On the surface, he was only a Radiant Saint Master who had just made it to Class 10, but in reality, he was also a fighter with a powerful soul. We're here. This is the Radiant Saint Hall. At this moment, the envoy said to Jian Chen. Jian Chen looked over with that. He discovered he had arrived amidst a mountain range that was extremely abundant in Radiant Saint Force. Stone huts or dwellings could be seen everywhere as white-robed Radiant Saint Masters moved about all over the place. They flew in the sky, wrapped around by a dense layer of white light. They seemed to possess the slight bearing of an immortal. Jian Chen only glanced at the landscape around him casually before suddenly raising his head and looking up ahead. He could see that a colossal divine hall stood amongst the clouds 1,000,000 kilometers away. It shone with dazzling, pure white light that illuminated the surroundings and enveloped the endless mountains. The entire divine hall seemed extremely holy. It gave off a sacred presence, which would make people feel reverence towards it. We're in the exterior mountains of the Radiant Saint Hall. The disciples of weaker strength and talent gather here. You're a 1-star genius, so you have the right to directly enter the interior mountains and take a Radiant God King as a teacher. Each Radiant God King is referred to as Protector in our Radiant Saint Hall. In the past decade, Protector Han has been responsible for all the new starred disciples. I'll take you to Protector Han's territory. You can cultivate under his tutelage from today onwards. If you are outstanding, maybe you'll gain the right to enter the sacred hall, the envoy explained to Jian Chen. As soon as he mentioned the sacred hall, he could not help but show anticipation. The envoy brought Jian Chen to one of the peak of the interior mountain before leaving by himself. Jian Chen discovered that aside from himself, there were 2 other people waiting there. He was familiar with the 2 of them. They were the 2 other starred geniuses who had entered the Radiant Saint Hall with him. They were the 1-star genius Biyao and the 5-star genius Shuofeng. You're a starred genius as well? Can you tell me how many stars you have? Jian Chen's arrival immediately attracted Biyao and Shuofeng's gazes. Biyao looked at Jian Chen as she blinked with her large eyes as she asked him curiously. I barely just made it into the ranks of the 1-star geniuses. Jian Chen showed off his token of authority and said indifferently. How many colors does your soul core have? Shuofeng asked with undisguised arrogance as if he was superior to Jian Chen. There were no Class 10 or Class 11 in the Saints' world. Cultivation level was determined by the colors of the soul core. I only just condensed the first color. Jian Chen ignored Zhuo Feng's attitude and said indifferently. He was not a fighter anymore. He was just a weak radiant saint master. You've only condensed the first color? He, then I'm stronger than you. I've already condensed the second color. Senior Zhuo Feng is the most powerful. He has already reached the peak of the three-colored soul core. If no accidents happen, Senior Zhuo Feng should be our first senior brother, while I will be the second senior sister. As for you, you'll be our little junior brother. Little junior brother, what's your name? Oh right, quickly greet me as your senior sister. Biyao was especially active and open. She giggled at Jian Chen. As for Zhuo Feng, he could not help but begin looking down on Jian Chen after he heard that Jian Chen only had a one-colored soul core. Chapter 22:17. The Celestial Sword. Saint Jian Chen looked at Biyao rather speechlessly. He said, "Do you really want to be the senior this much? And isn't it too soon for you to decide that you're my senior?" Biyao rolled her eyes as she said rather complacently, "It's not me who wants to be your senior. Who can help the fact that I'm stronger than you? That's why I can only just accept you as my little junior brother. Junior, why don't you call me your senior sooner? If you make me your senior happy, I'll protect you in the future. Once someone bullies you, feel free to come to find your senior sister." Biyao purposefully acted gallantly at the end. However, when she tried to give off a bearing like that, Jian Chen saw nothing close to it. Jian Chen burst into laughter. Did he still need the protection of a radiant saint master who was only at returnance? Of course. If even senior sister can't stop the powerful opponent, there's still first senior brother. Isn't that right, Senior Zhuo Feng? Junior sister is right. If there are any ignorant bastards who offends junior sister in the future, feel free to come to find me. I'll stand forward for you. Zhuo Feng revealed a radiant smile on his handsome face as he looked at Biyao amiably. However, Zhuo Feng did not even glance at Jian Chen as if he did not take him seriously at all. Zhuo Feng, Biyao, Changyang, come to the top of the mountain immediately. At this moment, a heavy voice boomed out from the sky. Jian Chen, Biyao, and Zhuo Feng all looked at the top of the mountain when they heard that. They all understood that the owner of the voice was extremely likely to be their teacher. Biyao and Zhuo Feng immediately became prudent. A radiant god king could still strike a certain amount of awe in them. Biyao and Zhuo Feng immediately dared not tarry. They both condensed radiant saint force and flew towards the top of the mountain peak as soon as they heard the voice. However, as soon as they tried to condense radiant saint force, they discovered in surprise that an invisible force bound their bodies. They were unable to fly at all. However, the two of them soon realized that this was probably a test from their future teacher. Immediately, they made up their minds and ran towards the top of the mountain. Jian Chen remained completely calm. He stared at the mountain top for a while before chasing behind Biyao and Zhuo Feng with a single movement. He followed behind them steadily, hurrying towards the top of the mountain. At the same time, in the vast outer space beyond the desolate plain, a streak of azure light shot through deep space with unbelievable speed. Unsurprisingly, the streak of light headed straight for the huge piece of land floating in space. In the end, the azure streak of light did not enter the boundary of the desolate plain. It stopped outside the desolate plain in the sea of stars and turned into a man in azure clothes. The man was the infamous heavenly king of azure brilliance of the saints' world, the Azure Peng King. He's actually on the desolate plain. The Azure Peng King hovered in outer space with his presence concealed. He stared at the desolate plain and frowned. I can't wait any longer. The solitary sword ancestor is about to come. I have to get the Anata Tower from Jian Chen before the solitary sword ancestor no matter what, even if I have to pay a certain price, thought the Azure Peng King. He made up his mind and carefully concealed his presence, approaching the desolate plain silently with an extremely low profile. Piss off. However, a voice boomed out in outer space at this moment. In the next moment, extremely powerful laws of the sword condensed in outer space, and in a single instance, it formed a colossal strand of sword chi in the sea of stars. The sword chi was over 100,000 kilometers long. It was truly colossal. From afar, it hung in the sky like a resplendent galaxy, shining with dazzling and blinding light, illuminating outer space before directly chopping towards the Azure Peking. Under the slash of the sword chi, the sky full of starlight twisted as if countless stars had fallen out from space. The terrifying sword chi split space into two. It was horrifying. The Azure Peking's expression changed. He did not receive the strike forcefully. Instead, he flickered with azure light and unleashed his great speed, turning into a blur that retreated to 10 million kilometers away to avoid the attack. Celestial Sword Saint, I don't wish to have conflict with you. The murderer of my disciple is on the desolate plain right now. I only want to capture the murderer of my beloved disciple. I hope you don't interfere, the Azure Peking said coldly with a sunken face. I don't care about your reason. If you want to step on the desolate plain, feel free to try it, the Celestial Sword Saint's voice rang out from the sea of stars. It was cold and filled with killing intent. The Azure Peking hovered in the distant space and stared at the desolate plain uneasily. However, he still did not take that step in the end. Before long, the space beside the Azure Peking suddenly twisted. A huge crack suddenly appeared, and the solitary sword ancestor with a sword on his back charged out from the crack while seated on his meteor. The huge meteor stopped near the Azure Peking. The solitary sword ancestor stared at the desolate plain before standing up and clasping his fist in the direction of the desolate plain. Celestial Sword Saint, long time no see. How have you been? Solitary Sword, you've actually come as well. You can come over, but that blue bird brain is forbidden from setting foot on the desolate plain, said the Celestial Sword Saint. He spoke brutally, showing no respect to the Azure Peking. Having been called a blue bird brain despite being the heavenly king of azure brilliance, the Azure Peking's face immediately paled in anger and sank in a terrifying manner. The solitary sword ancestor clasped his fist at the Celestial Sword Saint again. After exchanging pleasantries, he took a step away from his meteor and entered the desolate plain. But at this moment, the solitary sword ancestor's expression changed. Suddenly, he looked behind him. A white-robed, middle-aged man strode over through the vast sea of stars. He crossed an extremely great distance with each step, directly making his way towards the solitary sword ancestor. In just a few seconds, the middle-aged man arrived a few kilometers away from the solitary sword ancestor. You seem to have come for me specially? Are you looking for me for something particular? The solitary sword ancestor stopped and looked back at the white-robed man. He frowned slightly. The Azure Peking also noticed the middle-aged man, but he only glanced at him before losing interest because the middle-aged man was just too weak. He did not raise the Azure Peking's attention at all. I heard you issued a bounty for Jianchen everywhere? The middle-aged man looked at the solitary sword ancestor calmly and said with great composure. The only successor of my solitary sword lineage was killed by Jianchen, growled the solitary sword ancestor. There are two reasons why I'm looking for you. The first is that I hope you can give up on the bounty in your hunt for Jianchen, said the middle-aged man. He remained calm the entire time. The Azure Peking became angered when he heard that. However, he did not act up on the spot. He could tell that the middle-aged man was not as simple as he seemed, so he turned towards the solitary sword ancestor and said to him secretly, Who is this person? He's a mere 9th heavenly layer infinite prime, yet he dares to talk to you like that? Do not underestimate him. He's not someone that should be provoked. What you see right now is only a clone of his, the solitary sword ancestor replied sternly. Chapter 22:18, Second Senior Brother. The Azure Peking's face immediately sank from the solitary sword ancestor's cautious warning. The solitary sword ancestor had revealed one fact to him without any doubt. The middle-aged man who was only a 9th heavenly layer infinite prime possessed an extremely powerful original body. Even a peak expert as powerful as the solitary sword ancestor had to act cautiously. Originally, the middle-aged man had nothing to do with him, the Azure Peking, but he just happened to want to protect Jian Chen, who the Azure Peng King wanted to kill. It immediately made the Azure Peng King's expression become rather ugly. The solitary sword ancestor fell silent when he heard the middle-aged man's words. He looked at the white-robed, determined man indifferently and only said after quite a while, "You know just how difficult it is to find a suitable successor for my solitary sword ancestor. Gong Zheng was the only person I managed to find in the vast saint's world after so much difficulty, but in the end, he was slain by Jian Chen in the Neptunian Divine Palace before he could fully mature and spread his wings. If you want to protect Jian Chen, how will I be able to explain this to the past generations of my solitary sword lineage?" The white-robed man smiled indifferently. "Finding a suitable successor might be an extremely arduous matter to you, but it's nothing for me." The solitary sword ancestor's eyes narrowed when he heard that. Immediately, he stared at the middle-aged man with brimming interest and asked eagerly, "Are you willing to find suitable successors for me?" The middle-aged man nodded. "It's not a matter of finding suitable successors. I've already found suitable successors. There are 3 juniors with great talent who are extremely suitable to become successors of your solitary sword lineage." 3? Really? The solitary sword ancestor's face lit up, and his eyes shone. "You know whether I'm telling the truth or not. Solitary sword, I'll use these 3 successors to exchange for your bounty on Jian Chen. Moreover, you cannot target Jian Chen in the future anymore. Do you agree?" The middle-aged man said indifferently. "All right, I agree. If the 3 of them become successors to my solitary sword lineage, not only will I stop targeting Jian Chen, but I'll even owe you a huge favor," the solitary sword ancestor said loudly. Jubilation filled his voice. It was extremely difficult for his solitary sword lineage to find successors. Even during its most glorious time, there were no more than 10 successors. In his generation, there had only been a single successor, Gong Zheng. As a result, the solitary sword ancestor was naturally overjoyed when he suddenly heard news of 3 successors. "You said there are 2 reasons why you're looking for me. What's the second reason?" the solitary sword ancestor asked. "I want you to take action personally," said the middle-aged man. "You want me to take action?" The solitary sword ancestor was surprised. The middle-aged man sank into his thoughts for a while before telling the solitary sword ancestor secretly, "My original body is trapped. I need you to take action and destroy a seal." The solitary sword ancestor immediately became stern. He glanced at the middle-aged man with his eyes that had seen many aspects of life and thought for a very long time before nodding slowly. Seeing the solitary sword ancestor agree, the middle-aged man's face did not change at all. He remained calm and composed the entire time. A shard of jade directly shot into the solitary sword ancestor's hand, and the middle-aged man said, "Here is the location of your 3 successors." Afterwards, the middle-aged man no longer remained there. He took a step and left, entering the desolate plain with composure. He did not even glance at the Azure Peng King as if he was nothing. "Solitary sword, who is he?" The Azure Peng King arrived before the solitary sword ancestor in a flash and asked with a sunken face after the middle-aged man had left. The solitary sword ancestor shook his head gently. He did not seem to be willing to talk about the middle-aged man's identity. However, he did open his mouth, tempted to warn the Azure Peng King to give up on his hunt for Jian Chen, but as soon as he was going to say it, he remembered the Azure Peng King's nature. He knew that even if he warned the Azure Peng King, it would not change his mind, so he said nothing in the end. He took the shard of jade with the location of the 3 successors and left eagerly in excitement and anticipation. Seeing the solitary sword ancestor leave, the Azure Peng King became uneasy. He looked at the huge desolate plain that hovered in space, and the light in his eyes flickered with uncertainty. In the end, he was still unwilling to just watch Jian Chen hide on the desolate plain safely. He called out, "Celestial Sword Saint, the grievances of the past are in the past. It has already been so many years, so why must you cling on to them? If you give me just 2 hours on the desolate plain, I will definitely give you a great remuneration." Ha ha ha, in terms of vengefulness, how many people can match up to you Azure Bird Brain in the entire Saints world? It's still the same as before. If you want to step onto the desolate plain, feel free to try it, the Celestial Sword Saint replied with a provocation and threat. He did not appear, but his voice boomed through outer space like a great bell. The Azure Pen King's face paled in anger. He glanced in the direction of the desolate plain icily and snorted coldly before turning around and leaving. However, he did not go far away. Instead, he sat down on a meteor in the distant space, observing Jian Chen from far away. Jian Chen, I'd like to see how long you can remain on the desolate plain, the Azure Pen King thought as he looked at the fingernail-sized land in the distance. Jian Chen, Biyao, and Zhuofeng currently unleashed their full might in the Radiant Saint Hall, running towards the top of the mountain crazily. They moved extremely quickly, just like 3 streaks of white light that vanished through the forest in a flash. Out of the 3 of them, Zhuofeng was the strongest, possessing a 3-colored soul core. His entire body bathed in milky white radiant saint force as he ran at the front. Following him was Biyao with her 2-colored soul core, while Jian Chen was last. In reality, Jian Chen could completely break free from the restraints of the mysterious power with his current cultivation and reach the top of the mountain in a single step. However, his status now was only a Radiant Saint Master who had just condensed a 1-colored soul core, so the strength he could display was completely restricted to that. However, even with that being the case, the strength he displayed could not be compared to the Radiant Saint force from a 1-colored soul core. As they sprinted, he gradually inched closer to Biyao. And this was Jian Chen holding back, unwilling to stand out. Otherwise, he could easily surpass Biyao and Zhuofeng. In the end, Zhuofeng reached the mountain top first. Jian Chen, on the other hand, sped up slightly at the final juncture, allowing him to be 1 step faster than Biyao to claim second. It also made Biyao, who was originally second, end up last as 3rd place. Little junior brother, I couldn't tell that you were actually even faster than senior sister. Biyao looked at Jian Chen as she breathed rather heavily. Very good. Since everyone is here, I formally announce that Zhuofeng, Changyang, and Biyao will be the students of Han Xian. In the future, I'll be responsible for guiding you on the path of cultivation as a Radiant Saint Master. A white-robed middle-aged man stood before the 3 of them. He seemed graceful and refined, slightly like a scholar, but his eyes shone brightly as he spoke to the 3 of them. From today onwards, Zhuofeng will be the first senior brother. Changyang, you will be the second senior brother, while Biyao will be the little junior sister, Han Xian said firmly, leaving no room for discussion. Huh? How did I become the smallest? No. Master, this isn't fair. This doesn't make sense. I should be the second senior, so why did I end up as the smallest? Biyao refused to accept this. Sir, I have a 2-colored soul core, while junior Changyang has only condensed his 1-colored soul core. I have no objections about senior Zhuofeng being the first senior, but why must junior Changyang, who's weaker than me, have more seniority? That's clearly unfair. Han Xian looked at Biyao and said, who told you seniority is determined by cultivation? Is that not it? Biyao pointed and said matter-of-factly. She felt wronged. Here, whoever makes it to the mountain top earlier will have greater seniority. Zhuofeng made it first, so he is the first senior. Changyang followed him, so Changyang is the second senior. You were last, so you're naturally the youngest in terms of seniority, Han Xian said firmly. Then he waved his hand, enough. The matter has been settled, so don't talk about it anymore. Go find a place to set up a dwelling yourself as a place for cultivation. Come see me tomorrow morning. Remember, the dwelling must lie within my territory. With that, Han Xian directly left without even glancing at Biyao's sulking expression. Sir, how can you do this? It's unfair, Biyao sulked as Han Xian walked away. She was close to crying. Chapter 22:19, Laws of the Hallowed. No. Changyang, I want to change it back. I'm your senior sister. You're my little junior brother, Biyao turned towards Jianchen. She glared at him and purposefully put up a stern demeanor like she was threatening him. Jianchen could not help but smile. That's not something the two of us can decide. If junior sister is unwilling to accept it, junior can only go find teacher. With that, Jianchen left and made his way off the mountain. Who's your little junior sister? Changyang, you're not allowed to call me that in the future, Biyao called out in annoyance. As if she had just suffered an injustice, she was unhappy. Afterwards, Jianchen found a quiet area halfway up the mountain and carved out a cave, which would be his dwelling for cultivation in the future. The place he chose was inconspicuous. Not only was it in a remote region, but it was also among the bushes, so basically half of the entrance was obscured. It seemed extremely well hidden. As a dwelling, it naturally needed protective formations. However, it was inappropriate for Jianchen to cast down overly powerful formations here, so he found some weaker formation discs and set them up at the entrance as protective formations. In just 6 hours, Jianchen had completely set up his simple dwelling. Afterwards, he sat down in the center and began to think over his plans for the future. I can't stay in the Radiant Saint Hall for too long. The main reason why I've come here is for the cultivation method of hallowed Saint Masters. Once I get the cultivation method, I'll leave immediately. Jianchen had begun to make up his mind secretly. As for the threat from the Azure Peking, he had already thought of a plan. Since the Azure Peking cannot set foot on the desolate plain, I have no need to worry about him at all here. If I leave the desolate plain in the future, I can go directly to the heavenly palace of Bishing on the Prosper Plain and return the Anata Tower before asking the experts of the heavenly palace of Bishing to suppress the Azure Peking. The only issue is the solitary sword ancestor. If he comes to the desolate plain, I can only attempt the path of swords, thought Jianchen. Although he had already altered his appearance now, his disguise was basically useless before an expert like the solitary sword ancestor. The celestial sword saint set up the path of swords on the desolate plain, and it's rumored that reaching the end will give you the right to become the celestial sword saint's disciple. I don't know what level of cultivation the celestial sword saint has reached, but it's quite obvious from the rumors that he's an extremely terrifying existence on the desolate plain. He shouldn't be any weaker than the solitary sword saint, so if push comes to shove, I'll go attempt it. However, attempting the path of swords also carries a tremendous amount of risk. I shouldn't attempt it unless I have no other choice because I don't have complete confidence that I can hide the sword spirits from an existence like the solitary sword saint with my current level of cultivation. As he grew stronger, Jianchen's ability to hide the sword spirits became better and better. After all, he was someone who had reached the major achievement of the chaotic body. Unless he encountered a peak expert who was far more powerful than him, it would be impossible for his greatest secrets to be discovered in a single glance. Before long, Jianchen dismissed all of these thoughts. He spent the remaining time to consolidate his soul core that had just broken through. Cultivation was timeless, so he completely lost track of time. As a result, when Jianchen roused from cultivation, it was already noon on the next day. The time that Han Xian told them to meet it had passed long ago. Looking at the sky, Jianchen frowned. He left the cave and displayed the strength that belonged to a one-colored soul core radiant Saint Master and flew towards the top of the mountain. Very soon, Jianchen reached the top of the mountain. He discovered that Zhuofeng and Biyao were seated on the ground. They were surrounded by milky white radiant saint force, clearly already cultivating. Han Xian stood with his arms behind his back. He had his back towards the two of them as he blankly stared at the radiant saint hall that stood within the clouds. Eagerness filled the depths of his eyes. Changyang, why are you late on the first day? Han Xian asked with his back towards Jianchen. He spoke very indifferently. Sir, I only broke through to one-colored soul core yesterday, so when I was consolidating my cultivation in my dwelling, I forgot about time. I only roused just then. Jianchen clasped his fist and said with composure. All right, Han Xian replied gently. He did not look back at Jianchen, nor did he continue to dwell on the matter. Instead, he said, do you know what Radiant Saint Force is? Jianchen was slightly surprised by this question. He thought that Han Xian was going to give him a full lecture on being late, but he had never thought it would end up like this. After a moment of thought, Jianchen said, Radiant Saint Force, from a simple sense, is an energy that only Radiant Saint Masters can see. This energy does not have outstanding offensive powers, but it has great healing powers. It can even revive people from the dead, making it extremely wondrous. From a more complicated aspect, Radiant Saint Force is one of the 3,000 ways that creates and supports the operation of this world. You are very correct. Radiant Saint Force is actually also one of the 3,000 laws. Do you know what the difference between Hallowed Saint Masters and Radiant Saint Master are? Han Xian continued to ask. This time, Jianchen hesitated for a while before replying, I don't know much about Hallowed Saint Masters, nor do I understand much about them. All I know is that Hallowed Saint Masters have grasped another law and are able to transform Radiant Saint Force, making it extremely powerful and offensive despite being rather below average originally. Its strength is no weaker than the laws known to possess the most offensive powers. Jianchen had seldom come in contact with Hallowed Saint Master. There was only Xian Ming, so his knowledge about Hallowed Saint Master was naturally extremely limited. Han Xian finally returned to his senses. He looked at Jianchen with shining eyes, Changyang, everything else was correct. There's just one thing you got wrong. The law grasped by Hallowed Saint Masters is not equal to the laws known to possess the greatest offensive powers. It is even stronger. Do you know why? Before Jianchen could reply, Han Xian continued, that's because the laws grasped by Hallowed Saint Masters is not just the power of laws, but the power of our spirits as well. This type of law is known as the laws of the hallowed by us. The power of spirits, Jianchen murmured. He found the term spirit both familiar and unfamiliar because it was the original form of the soul. Since many years ago, only souls existed in the world he interacted with. Very people still used the term spirit. I think I explained this before. The soul/spirit kind of undergoes a metamorphosis after reaching sainthood, saint ruler in particular, and it basically becomes unbound from the soul, so even if the body is destroyed, the person is still alive as long as their souls are intact. In Chinese, they switch terms, so there's an individual term for soul before sainthood, and then an individual term for soul after sainthood. This frequently happens with many novels. However, the past translator never ended up planning for this, so I just used spirit/soul here to show the difference. Watch closely. This is the laws of the hallowed. Han Xian raised his hand slowly, and a blinding ball of white light gradually condensed in his hand. That was the laws of the hallowed. Jianchen stared at the laws of the hallowed in Han Xian's hand closely. The first time he had seen the laws of the hallowed was from Xian Ming, so this was the second time seeing it. However, he gained a completely different feeling from seeing the laws of the hallowed here compared to when he saw it from Xian Ming. This was because at that time, Xian Ming had used the laws of the hallowed to attack, completely displaying the swift and brutal aspect of the laws. It was extremely fast as well, so Jianchen did not have much time to comprehend its secrets. Yet now, the laws of the hallowed in Han Xian's hands seemed much gentler to Jianchen. Moreover, Han Xian condensed the laws at an extremely gradual rate, not only allowing Jianchen to sense the mysteries in the laws with greater clarity, but also giving him ample time to closely comprehend it. Jianchen could not help but close his eyes. At that moment, he felt like his soul had flown out and fused with the laws of the hallowed in Han Xian's hand. Under this state, he could clearly sense all the mysteries of the laws of the hallowed, sensing all the changes that the laws went through in Han Xian's hands. At that moment, Jianchen even felt like he had become the laws of the hallowed in Han Xian's hand, where they were inseparable. Chapter 22:20, Mo Tianyun. Unknowingly, Jianchen had already sat down. Milky white radiant saint force had enveloped him as well, gathering the radiant saint force from the surroundings unintentionally. As a result, he seemed exactly the same as Biyao and Zhuofeng right now, all of them being in a state of cultivation. However, unlike Biyao and Zhuofeng, Jian Chen's comprehension of the laws of the hallowed increased rapidly, while other two still struggled to grasp the secrets of the laws. As his comprehension constantly deepened, Jian Chen's knowledge and understanding of the laws of the hallowed became greater and greater. He had almost reached a rudimentary level with the laws. Time passed in a hurry. In the blink of an eye, it was already the evening of that day. Only when the sun set and dyed the sky red did they rouse. Sir, the laws of the hallowed are far too profound and mysterious. Even after a day of comprehending the laws of the hallowed you invoked, I still haven't made any progress, Biyao pouted and said in low spirits. Han Xian smiled. I never expected the three of you to grasp the laws of the hallowed immediately. Let alone you, but even 9-star geniuses won't be able to grasp the laws of the hallowed from a single glance at the same level of cultivation as you. My true intention was for you to witness the gateway to becoming a hallowed Saint Master so that I can pave a path for you beforehand. That way, it'll become slightly easier when you become a hallowed Saint Master in the future. Sir, is it very difficult to comprehend the laws of the hallowed and become a hallowed Saint Master? Jian Chen asked. Han Xian nodded. It is quite difficult. For a radiant Saint Master to comprehend the laws of the hallowed and become a hallowed Saint Master, it's no less difficult than a fighter going from the origin realm to godhood, or even more difficult. In our Radiant Saint Hall, basically all the Radiant Saint Masters with 3-colored soul cores spend a very long time before becoming a hallowed Saint Master. There are even other Radiant Saint Masters who only manage to truly comprehend the laws of the hallowed after condensing a 4-colored soul core. Of course, everything depends on personal talent. Some unprecedented prodigies can comprehend the laws of the hallowed before condensing a 3-colored soul core, but if your talent is far too lacking, even if you have a 7-colored soul core and become a radiant god king, you might not be fated to become a hallowed Saint Master. In the end, Han Xian looked at Zhuo Feng and said, Zhuo Feng, you're a 5-star genius, and you've already reached the 3-colored soul core. May I ask if you've benefited? Han Xian clearly held high hopes for Zhuo Feng. Zhuo Feng did not reply immediately. He thought about it for a while before replying, Sir, I've managed to benefit slightly, but I still need some time before I truly comprehend the laws of the hallowed. Han Xian nodded in satisfaction. I hope you can become a hallowed Saint Master while you have a 3-colored soul core. I will work hard and not disappoint you, sir, Zhuo Feng said with great confidence. These are my notes on comprehension that I've tidied through. Although it's not exactly precious, it'll bring some assistance to you. It also comes with a cultivation method that allows you to cultivate to the 4-colored soul core. The three of you should take it and comprehend it. Of course, this cultivation method is rather standard. It's only suitable for Radiant Saint Masters who have not condensed a 4-colored soul core, so it just happens to be enough for you. Han Xian then took out a few brand new books and passed it to Jian Chen, Biyao, and Zhuo Feng. Sir, may I ask how cultivation methods of higher grades can be obtained? Jian Chen asked. A cultivation method that could only reach the 4-colored soul core was nowhere near enough for him. Better cultivation methods can only be obtained from the Tower of Radiance in the Sacred Hall. However, you still don't have the right to enter the Tower of Radiance right now. Enough, that will be all for today. You are dismissed. Han Xian waved his hand, turned around, and left. Junior brother, you sure are bold, late on the first day. Quick, tell senior sister how teacher punished you. As soon as Han Xian left, Biyao looked at Jian Chen with her large eyes and asked curiously. What rudeness. I'm your second senior. You're the little junior sister, Jian Chen said in a joking yet displeased manner. Your cultivation is weaker than mine, so of course you can only be my little junior brother. Unless your cultivation exceeds mine, it'll be impossible for me to accept you as my second senior, Biyao snorted lightly and said in a purposefully arrogant manner. Zhuo Feng could not help but frown when he saw Biyao like that. He said, Junior sister, senior has already gained some understanding of the laws of the hallowed. Come to the moon-viewing cliff at night. We can discuss our experiences with comprehending the laws of the hallowed. Biyao completely understood. Zhuo Feng wanted to pass on what he had comprehended to her, so her eyes immediately lit up. She agreed excitedly, Alright, alright. I won't be leaving until you show up at the moon viewing cliff tonight. Little junior brother, you have to come along, and don't be late. Junior Changyang only has a one-colored soul core right now, so there's still some time before he comes in contact with the laws of the hallowed. He probably won't benefit if he comes, and it'll waste his time for cultivation instead. Junior Changyang, cultivate properly first. Once you condense a two-colored soul core, I'll pass on my experience to you, Zhuofeng said immediately. Clearly, he did not want Jian Chen to come. Thank you for your kind intentions, senior, but I just happen to desire to cultivate properly in a quiet environment. It would not be suitable for me to spend my time on other matters. Jian Chen smiled indifferently and left. Before long, Jian Chen returned to his extremely simple dwelling that had an entrance covered by bushes. He directly sat down and began to comprehend the laws of the hallowed again. 4 hours later, Jian Chen's eyes snapped open. He raised his hand slowly, and immediately, a white power with a brutal presence condensed in his hand. Unsurprisingly, this power was the laws of the hallowed. Han Xian's conjuring of the laws of the hallowed was like a lighthouse in the dark to Jian Chen. It pointed him in the direction that he could advance in, allowing him to gain a basic view of a rudimentary grasp over the laws of the hallowed. Now that he tried comprehending the laws again quietly, he basically grasped them completely before too long, becoming a hallowed Saint Master. Han Xian said that most radiant Saint Masters only become hallowed Saint Master when they have 3-colored or 4-colored soul cores, yet I've become one with just a 1-colored soul core, Jian Chen murmured as he looked at the laws of the hallowed that had gathered in his hand. It has been over 1,000,000 years since someone has become a hallowed Saint Master with a 1-colored soul core. Impressive. Impressive, Jian Chen. Your talent is indeed extremely outstanding. It fills me with amazement. Suddenly, a voice rang out from behind Jian Chen. The sudden voice immediately caused Jian Chen's face to change dramatically. He shot up from the group instinctively and turned around, looking behind him in shock. Even though he was cultivating, he still remained somewhat vigilant of the world around him, yet he failed to sense that someone had appeared in his dwelling silently while he was cultivating. A white-robed middle-aged man with a resolute face stood behind Jian Chen silently. He was like air, possessing no presence, and Jian Chen's soul and senses could not detect him. He could only see him with his eyes. However, when he saw the middle-aged man clearly, Jian Chen became completely stunned. Disbelief filled his face. Who are you? Jian Chen asked in surprise as he was in emotional turmoil. The middle-aged man smiled. I think you already know who I am. Senior Mo Tianyun, is it really you? Jian Chen called out. He felt rather dazed and felt like he was dreaming because the middle-aged man was the same person who had left behind a great legend that lasted 1,000,000 years on the Tianyuan continent, Mo Tianyun. Whether it was Shui Yunlan or Shaoling, they all wanted to find Mo Tianyun as soon as possible. However, the saint's world was so vast, so finding a single person was anything but easy. It was even more difficult than finding a needle in a haystack. However, he had never thought that Mo Tianyun would appear here, strangely enough, much less in his dwelling. How did Mo Tianyun find him? Moreover, Jian Chen did not use his original appearance. He currently had a completely different face. How did Mo Tianyun manage to recognize him with a single glance? Furthermore, this place was within the Radiant Saint Hall's territory. Was Mo Tianyun a part of the Radiant Saint Hall since he suddenly appeared here? At that moment, besides surprise and joy, Jian Chen was filled with queries now that he had suddenly found the greatest human expert of the past, Mo Tianyun. Chapter 22-21. Suspicions about identity. Mo Tianyun looked at Jian Chen in admiration and sighed emotionally. When my clones saw you near the Yinyang Saint Rock, you were nowhere close to godhood. I never thought that in just a few short centuries, you would become someone renowned in the saints' world. Apart from those hermits who always remain in seclusion, there's basically no one who doesn't know your name in the saints' world now. Mo Tianyun smiled mysteriously towards the end. Jian Chen smiled awkwardly. Naturally, he knew that Mo Tianyun was referring to the bounties from the Azure Peng King and the solitary sword ancestor. Indeed, a mere god king wanted by two peak experts of the saints' world, the Azure Peng King and the solitary sword ancestor, would lead to quite the disturbance. It would even raise the close attention of many large organizations. Senior Mo Tianyun, how did you find me? Are you a part of the Radiant Saint Hall? Jian Chen stated his suspicions. I'm not a part of the Radiant Saint Hall, but finding you is nothing difficult, Mo Tianyun smiled mysteriously. He looked at Jian Chen amiably and said, do you still remember that tower-shaped saint artifact you got from the Radiant Saint Union on the Tian Yuan continent? Of course I do, said Jian Chen. The Radiant Saint artifact had been of great use to him back in the lower world. It was also the reason why he could become a Class 9 Radiant Saint Master. However, the quality of the Radiant Saint Tower was limited. As his strength increased, the Radiant Saint artifact gradually became useless, so he never really used it after coming to the Saints' world. The reason why I can find you in the vast Saints' world is because of that Radiant Saint artifact. In the past, a clone of mine entered the Radiant Saint artifact in the lower world and destroyed the seal within the Radiant Saint artifact while I was there, freeing up the Radiant Saint Force origin energy trapped there. When I destroyed the seal, I also left behind an extremely obscure imprint, so I could find you in the Saints' world as long as you still possessed the Radiant Saint artifact, said Mo Tianyun. Then, in other words, Senior already knew as soon as I came to the Saints' world? Jian Chen said. At the same time, he finally understood that the seal within the Radiant Saint artifact that even the artifact spirit could do nothing about was destroyed by Mo Tianyun. This made him feel some gratitude towards Mo Tianyun. After all, if it were not for the destruction of the seal, he would have never been able to become a Class 9 Radiant Saint Master. Mo Tianyun shook his head. I don't know exactly when you came to the Saints' world because the imprint I left in the Radiant Saint artifact can only be sensed through a corresponding secret technique. Jian Chen felt extremely elated when the past greatest human expert of the Tian Yuan continent had suddenly appeared. Afterwards, Jian Chen placed down a stone table outside the dwelling and sat there with Mo Tianyun. Under the dark, starry skies, they began a long conversation. Senior Mo Tianyun, I have something I'd like to inquire about. The winged tiger god that appeared on the Tian Yuan continent during the ancient times should be the same person as Senior Mo Tianyun, right? Or maybe he's a clone of Senior Mo Tianyun? Jian Chen asked. Jian Chen had gradually come up with this suspicion through his understanding of the past matters back on the Tian Yuan continent. However, he was just not certain. How did you reach that conclusion? Mo Tianyun asked calmly. Jian Chen focused his mind and tidied through his thoughts before saying slowly, first, of the 4 champions in the past, there have been records of growth for the war god Ergens of the 100 races and the sea goddess of the sea race. Only you and the winged tiger god basically appeared out of nowhere, and you were already far more powerful than Saint Emperors. There weren't any records of your growth in the ancient records at all. Secondly, the world where the Tian Yuan continent resides and had actually been sealed up over 3 million years ago, preventing anyone from reaching the origin realm. The reason why the war god could reach the origin realm was because of his powerful bloodline, while the sea goddess could reach the origin realm because she's the same as Shaoling, a natural spirit. And natural spirits are all at the origin realm as soon as they come into existence, unbound by the world. So whether it's Ergens or the sea goddess, there are all reasons why they can reach the origin realm. Only Senior Mo Tianyun and the winged tiger god had no reason at all. This makes the two of you extremely similar. Thirdly, when I looked through the records, I discovered that after the winged tiger god had vanished from the Tian Yuan continent with the dragon and phoenix clans, Senior Mo Tianyun vanished as well. Mo Tianyun smiled mysteriously. You determined that I was the winged tiger god just from that? Have you ever considered that once the winged tiger god left with the dragon and phoenix clans, I went to where the Yinyang Saint Rock was and watched over it? But you only sent a clone to watch over the rock, and the clone could have been the winged tiger god as well. Jian Chen stared at Mo Tianyun with brimming interest and continued, of course, this isn't enough to explain that Senior is the same person as the winged tiger god. The real reason why I was able to reach this conclusion was because of Xiao Ling. Xiao Ling, Mo Tianyun's eyes narrowed when he heard Xiao Ling's name, and a sliver of undetectable killing intent flickered through his eyes. Naturally, the killing intent was not directed towards Xiao Ling, but the heavenless demon Exalt. In the past when I was in Mercenary City, Xiao Ling had once sensed Senior's presence from me, but Senior had already vanished from the Tian Yuan continent for 1,000,000 years. How would it have been possible for me to come in contact with Senior? At that time, even I did not know why Xiao Ling sensed Senior's presence from me. But afterwards, as I grew stronger and stronger and understood more and more things, I finally realized that the presence Xiao Ling sensed from me was the presence from the young winged tiger god. At that time, the white tiger had only been born recently, so it was naturally unable to conceal its presence. I had spent so much time with the winged tiger god as well, so I naturally carried its presence. When Xiao Ling said she sensed her master's presence back then, it was more like sensing the presence of the winged tiger god. This presence belonged to winged tiger gods, but to different people at the same time, which was why Xiao Ling said the presence was extremely faint. Afterwards, as the white tiger grew up, he learned to conceal his presence, and his presence changed slightly, which was why Xiao Ling failed to sense anything from the white tiger anymore. And there's one more point. The 18 pieces of beast fur that have been spread across the world should have come from the winged tiger god, yet when they were united, Senior's legacy appeared, the way of slaughter. Senior comprehended the way of slaughter, while the legacy that the white tiger received in the beast god hall was also the way of slaughter. Jian Chen did not continue. Instead, he looked at Mo Tianyun quietly. Chapter 22-22, Origins of the Tower of Radiance. Mo Tianyun was in no hurry to speak after listening to Jian Chen's analysis. His expression did not change either. He continued to look at Jian Chen leisurely, but the admiration in his eyes became heavier. You're right. The winged tiger god from the ancient times was indeed me, Mo Tianyun said steadily. He did not try to hide this. Senior, just who are you? Jian Chen looked at Mo Tianyun deeply. Mo Tianyun smiled. It doesn't matter who you think I am. What's important is that you understand I have no ill intentions towards you. Of course, if you want to know about my origins, you are welcome to ask the sword spirits. They've probably guessed it already. Mo Tianyun, do you really come from the immortals' world? At this moment, the sword spirits appeared. A wisp of mist gradually condensed into two figures. They did not give off any presence or even sword chi. Clearly, the sword spirits knew that they were in the boundary of the Radiant Saint Hall, so they hid to their greatest ability. Mo Tianyun stared at the sword spirits and nodded. He did not talk. Mo Tianyun, why are you in the saints' world if you're from the immortals' world? And what's the situation with the immortals' world? Is the sword sect of violent heavens well? The sword spirits asked. They became nervous when the sword sect of violet heavens was mentioned. Mo Tianyun seemed to think back to the past from that, and a sliver of gloominess flashed through his eyes, along with deep hatred. In the end, Mo Tianyun sighed gently. He answered selectively, I've already left the immortals' world over 1,000,000 years ago. I only know that the sword sect of violet heavens suffered heavy losses from that battle over 3,000,000 years ago and was gradually declining. I do not know about its current situation. Has the sword sect of violent heavens declined? Ziying asked in low spirits. The sword sect of violet heavens lost far too many experts during that battle, so declining is expected. As long as the traditions and legacies of our sect remain, there will be a day where we become powerful once more, said Qing Suo. At this moment, she could not help but think about the warning from the samsaric immortal Exalt, where he said Jian Chen should not return to the immortals' world until he was powerful enough. For some reason, Qing Suo had suddenly felt an ill foreboding when she heard the samsaric immortal Exalt's words. Mo Tianyun looked at Jian Chen and said, Jian Chen, since you're both a fighter and a hallowed saint master, you must be a wielder of martial soul force. However, you must bear in mind that while being in the saint's world, you need to hide the existence of the sword spirits, but in the Radiant Saint Hall, you need to hide your identity as a wielder of martial soul force. You can't expose the fact that you can use martial soul force to the Radiant Saint Hall. Thank you for your concern, Senior. I already knew that the martial soul lineage has grievances with the Radiant Saint Hall. I definitely won't expose my martial soul force in the Radiant Saint Hall, Jian Chen said before pausing. Then he looked at Mo Tianyun eagerly and asked, Senior Mo Tianyun, do you know anything about martial soul force? There are just far too few members of the martial soul lineage in the saints' world, so there aren't a lot of rumors regarding martial soul force. I haven't come in contact with any people from the martial soul lineage either, so I don't understand this power very well, replied Mo Tianyun. Then he looked at the Radiant Saint Hall that stood among the clouds with all of its holiness and said, the Tower of Radiance within the Radiant Saint Hall has records of all cultivation methods and various battle skills for Radiant Saint Masters. It's an extremely rich collection, far more than what the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall knows. As a matter of fact, even the cultivation methods of the leader and vice leaders come from the Tower of Radiance. As a result, if you want to learn about martial soul force, you can only go to the Tower of Radiance. Are there really that many records in the Tower of Radiance? Jian Chen asked in surprise. Mo Tianyun did not answer his question. Instead, he looked at Ziying and Qing Sua. The Tower of Radiance is not simple. You two sword spirits should have heard about its origins to some degree. We do know a little. Ziying nodded. It said that the Tower of Radiance, us twin swords, and the Anata Grand Prime's Anata Tower are god artifacts of the same level. The Tower of Radiance has existed for an extremely long period of time. What? The Tower of Radiance is actually so powerful? Jian Chen's heart shuddered when he heard that. He asked, since the Tower of Radiance is such a powerful god artifact, wouldn't there be no organizations that would be bold enough to offend the Radiant Saint Hall on the desolate plain? That's correct. There is basically no one who is willing to provoke an organization with a god artifact like that across the entire Saints world, let alone on a single plane. However, the Tower of Radiance has lost its artifact spirit, unfortunately, Mo Tianyun explained to Jian Chen. He had been in the Saints world for so long, so his understanding of the Tower of Radiance was obviously greater than the sword spirits. Speaking of which, the Radiant Saint Hall is actually one of the lengthiest lineages in the Saints world's history. It has existed through 2 eons at the very least, and the Tower of Radiance was forged by a supreme expert who had reached a level akin to Grand Exalt's 2 eons ago. But throughout the glorious history of the Radiant Saint Hall, the Tower of Radiance has experienced several great battles. In the last battle, the Tower of Radiance was finally heavily damaged, and the artifact spirit died during that battle. As a result, the Tower of Radiance has only become a safe place to store records now. It has no other use. Mo Tianyun's explanation allowed Jian Chen to gain a brand new understanding of the Radiant Saint Hall. However, he also experienced doubts at the same time. He asked out of confusion, hasn't anyone refined the Tower of Radiance after that? And why has the Tower of Radiance only become a place to store records? Can't people hide in it when they encounter powerful enemies? The Tower of Radiance seems to be rather special. According to my understanding, probably only the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall who can directly come in contact with the secrets of the Tower of Radiance knows why no one has been able to refine the Tower of Radiance, said Mo Tianyun. Moreover, the Tower of Radiance isn't as simple as you think it is. When the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance passed away, its residual regrets filled every inch of the Tower of Radiance. All the hallowed Saint Masters that enter the Tower of Radiance have to endure the pressure from this regret at all times. Without enough strength, it's impossible to remain in there for long. Even radiant god kings will struggle to stay in there for a year. Chapter 22-23, A Deal. Senior Mo Tianyun, you seem to understand the Radiant Saint Hall a lot. Mo Tianyun smiled mysteriously again. I've come to the Radiant Saint Hall quite a few times. I've also entered their sacred hall, so I do know quite a lot about it. It looks like Senior Mo Tianyun has close ties with the high-ranking members of the Radiant Saint Hall, thought Jian Chen. Then he thought of something and asked, Senior Mo Tianyun, do you know how to enter the Tower of Radiance? Since Mo Tianyun knew the important figures of the Radiant Saint Hall, his knowledge was naturally greater than his teacher Han Xian. If Mo Tianyun knew the most direct way to enter the Tower of Radiance, it would be good news to Jian Chen. Mo Tianyun said in thought, 2 vice leaders need to take part personally whenever the Tower of Radiance is opened, so you can't just go in when you want to. The easiest way is to become the disciple of a vice leader and get them to open the Tower of Radiance for you. Once people learn about your talent, there'll be many vice leaders who would want to take you in as a disciple. After all, there has only been one other person who became a hallowed saint master with a one-colored soul core in the past 1,000,000 years. Moreover, the Radiant Saint Hall is about to decide a chosen saint. Once they have a chosen saint, the Tower of Radiance will be opened once again, and every single chosen saint can choose 9 retainers to enter the Tower of Radiance with them. Mo Tianyun paused. He seemed to look at Jian Chen with a smile. You can choose to become one of the 9 and follow the chosen saint into the Tower of Radiance. That's a second way in. Otherwise, there's only one last method. The Tower of Radiance opens once every 500 years, and all the Radiant Saint Masters can use their merit to exchange for time in the Tower of Radiance. However, I wouldn't recommend the last method. That's because only around 200 or 300 years have passed since the last opening, so you'll need to wait another 200 years at the very least. Jian Chen frowned when he heard that. He murmured, 200 years are indeed a little too long, but the first method will increase the risk of me exposing my martial soul force. It looks like I can only become a retainer of a chosen saint then. Being selected as a retainer is not easy. In the history of the Radiant Saint Hall, every single retainer has been a peak God King. Although peak God King Radiant Saint Masters have ceased to exist in the Radiant Saint Hall in the recent years, the chosen saints have never had retainers who were weaker than early God King. But right now, your level as a Radiant Saint Master is only equivalent to receival, said Mo Tianyun. It was very obvious what he was trying to say. With Jian Chen's current strength, he had no right to become a retainer of a chosen saint. It looks like becoming a retainer is almost impossible for me right now, Jian Chen smiled bitterly. At this moment, he really had no idea what to do. Did he really have to wait for 2 centuries? This was because the Tower of Radiance truly possessed something he needed. He might even be able to find everything the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall knew and many powerful cultivation methods and battle skills in there. This was because Mo Tianyun had already disclosed the fact that whether it was the leader or the vice leaders, all they knew came from the Tower of Radiance. As a result, Jian Chen had to enter the Tower of Radiance. However, out of all the choices presented before him right now, only the third one would work. He had never even considered taking a vice leader as a master, as it would definitely increase his chances of being exposed. He could hide the existence of the sword spirits, but he did not have complete confidence in hiding his martial soul force. As a vice leader of the Radiant Saint Hall, their cultivation would definitely be far greater than his. Their knowledge, understanding, and the comprehension of the laws of the hallowed would be at a level that Jian Chen could only look up to. As long as he exposed a single hole in his story, he might end up being exposed. However, becoming a retainer of a chosen saint required the cultivation of a 7-colored soul core at the very least. He had just condensed a 1-colored soul core, so he was nowhere near that level. Xian Ming's father was one of the 8 vice leaders. Currently, Shuang Ming was hiding in the Inata Tower. Jian Chen did consider using his connection to Xian Ming, but he also ended up dismissing the idea. Xian Ming already knew his identity as a fighter. If he asked Xian Ming for help, it would be no different than actively exposing his martial soul force. Seeing Jian Chen's frown, Mo Tianyun smiled. If you're willing to become the retainer of a chosen saint, I do have quite a good idea. What idea? Jian Chen immediately asked. Even if he had to become the retainer of a chosen saint temporarily, he would be extremely willing as long as he could enter the Tower of Radiance. Mo Tianyun waved his hand, and a fist-sized ball of light immediately appeared. Jian Chen immediately felt an uncontrollable desire rise up from the depths of his soul when he saw the ball of light. he was tempted to devour the ball of light directly. The ball of light gave off a feeling that brought great comfort to Jian Chen's soul. Just a few glances at it gave him the impression that the power of his soul had increased drastically. This is a pure soul, the purest power of an expert's soul after it has been refined countless times and purged of all impurities, Jian Chen called out. He just happened to have read about pure souls from a space ring he had obtained, so he recognized it with a single glance. This pure soul actually gives me almost irresistible urges. It looks like this pure soul has been refined from a primordial realm expert's soul at the very least, Jian Chen said sternly as his emotions became extremely mixed. A primordial realm expert could be considered as someone who had made it to the apex of the saints' world. These figures were once supreme existences in his eyes, yet now, he was actually looking at a pure soul refined from a primordial realm expert's soul. The owner of this pure soul was an infinite prime, so the density of the power within it is enough to interest any god king. This should be enough to tempt those 9-star geniuses who are about to take part in the competition to become the chosen saint, said Mo Tianyun. The light in Jian Chen's eyes flickered as he hesitated. In the end, he shook his head. Senior, this is just too precious. I can't accept it. Mo Tianyun smiled faintly. Don't worry, I'm not giving you this pure soul for nothing. I'll use this and some other treasures to strike a deal with you. May I ask what item on me has caught Senior's eyes? Jian Chen's heart tightened as he suddenly thought of the Inata tower on him. Chapter 22-24, The Fusion of the Twin Swords. It had already been some time since he left planet Tianming. The news that the Inata tower was on him had probably been leaked by now. As a peak god artifact, the Inata tower's value was enough to drive countless peak experts mad even if it was still damaged. What happened on planet Tianming was the best example. As a result, when Jian Chen heard that Mo Tianyun wanted to strike a deal with him, he subconsciously thought of the Inata tower. Apart from the Inata tower, he could not think of anything else he possessed that could catch Mo Tianyun's attention. Senior, has the Inata tower caught your eye? Jian Chen asked. The value of the Inata tower was far greater than a single pure soul. If Mo Tianyun really did want the Inata tower, what was he supposed to do? Seeing how stern Jian Chen had become, Mo Tianyun could not help but smile bitterly. The Inata tower is an object of desire. It's not something that anyone can try to possess. If Exion of the heavenly palace of Bishing decides to look into this matter, there's basically no one who can maintain possession over it. What I want is for you to take action once. You want me to take action? Jian Chen was surprised by that. His expression became strange, and he said, Senior Mo Tianyun, I might not be able to provide you with any assistance at all with my current strength. Mo Tianyun shook his head gently. Never underestimate yourself. You have the sword spirits. Even if your current strength is very weak, even if the sword spirits have not recovered to their peak condition, fusing the two swords can still unleash startling power. Mo Tianyun stared at Jian Chen sternly, and I happen to need you to use the two swords once. No. Master, don't agree to it. Master, you must not. The backlash from fusing the two swords is so powerful that you should never do it unless you've run out of choices. Before Jian Chen could say anything, Ziying and Qing Suo objected. To the two sword spirits, the fusion of the twin swords had long since become a forbidden technique that they should never touch unless they were completely out of options. This was because even their master, who was a grand exalt, died to the fusion of the twin swords in the end, so it was even more impossible for Jian Chen to survive. Jian Chen remained calm. He looked at Mo Tianyun and said, Senior Mo Tianyun, can you tell me the reason? Why do you need me to fuse the two swords? Mo Tianyun sighed gently. He stood up from his seat and stood in the overgrown grass around the cliff. He stared at the shining moon in the sky and said, It's fine if I tell you. What you are seeing right now is actually one of my 9 major clones. My original body has been trapped in a powerful formation by an enemy. The formation is tough, but it can't keep me trapped forever. In just several tens of thousand years, I'll be able to break free with my strength alone. But recently, something happened on the cloud plane. Shaoling was taken away by the heavenless demon Exalt of the Tian Empire. The heavenless demon Exalt is a demonic cultivator, so Shaoling is in constant danger. As a result, my original body has to break free immediately. What? Shaoling has been captured. Jian Chen's face changed drastically. Suddenly, he stood up, and his gaze became extremely sharp. Killing intent rose up in his heart. He treated Shaoling as his own younger sister. He would never allow anything to happen to her. Senior Mo Tianyun, what cultivation does this heavenless demon Exalt possess? Jian Chen asked gruffly with an ugly expression. He has just become a fourth heavenly layer Grand Prime. He's not much weaker compared to the Azure Peng King who has been hunting you, said Mo Tianyun. Jian Chen's heart sank when he learned of the heavenless demon Exalt's strength. He felt powerless. A fourth heavenly layer Grand Prime was an insurmountable existence in his eyes. You don't need to worry. As long as my original body breaks free, the heavenless demon Exalt is no issue, said Mo Tianyun. He spoke indifferently, like he did not take the heavenless demon Exalt seriously at all. If that's the case, let's go right now. I'll fuse the twin swords and assist you in destroying the seal, Jian Chen said without any hesitation. He was panic-stricken, extremely worried about Shaoling's safety. Master, the fusion is far too dangerous. Master, you can't act recklessly, the sword spirits continually tried to persuade Jian Chen. In their eyes, Jian Chen had no need to fuse the twin swords at all over this. The price was just not worth it. Ziying, Qing Sua, you don't have to say anything more. As long as I can save Shaoling, I don't mind no matter how great the price is, Jian Chen said firmly. You don't need to worry too much. The fusion of the twin swords isn't necessarily a bad thing to Jian Chen. Jian Chen cultivates the chaotic body, but according to my knowledge of chaotic force, even if he reaches the peak of great perfection, it still will not be the real deal. That power that split the heavens from the earth that appears when the swords fuse is true chaotic force. The previous master of the twin swords died during the fusion because he never cultivated the chaotic body. He was unable to endure the impact of the chaotic force, but Jian Chen is completely different. If he fuses the twin swords, he can sense what true chaotic force is like, Mo Tianyun said to the sword spirits. The sword spirits immediately fell silent after that. They knew Mo Tianyun was right. Then Mo Tianyun looked at Jian Chen and said, I need to properly prepare before destroying the seal. There are some secrets that only the two of us know, and it should remain like that. Wait for me. I'll come back for you in 3 days. Jian Chen nodded. Naturally, he understood what Mo Tianyun was referring to. It was the problem of their identity. Once their identity of being from the immortals' world was exposed, they would no longer be able to remain in the saints' world. Afterwards, Mo Tianyun left. He left just like how he had come, silently and without leaving a single trace. Jian Chen was in no mood to cultivate anymore. Shaoling had been captured, ending up in the hands of a demonic cultivator. No one knew how she was right now. Jian Chen became unsettled and unable to sit still, worrying for Shaoling very much. What is Ming Dong doing? Hasn't he left for the cloud plane long ago? How did Shaoling end up being captured? Jian Chen grumbled inside. At that moment, he even considered handing the Anata Tower to the heavenly palace of Bisheng immediately so that he could ask the First Majesty to assist him. However, after thinking it over several times, he found that Mo Tianyun would be slightly more reliable. After all, Mo Tianyun was the same as him. He was someone who truly cared for Shaoling. In the following 3 days, Jian Chen truly understood how days could feel like years. During those 3 days, he was in no mood to cultivate at all. Whenever he saw Han Xian in the morning every day, he seemed like he was absent-minded the entire time. Chapter 22-25. the cosmic formation of the fire-purifying lotus. Little junior brother, what is wrong with you recently? Why are you always frowning? If there's anything bothering you, you can tell me, you're senior. I might be able to help you, Biyao whispered in Jian Chen's ear. There was a refreshing fragrance on her body. Her voice was filled with concern. Even Han Xian managed to tell that someone was off with Jian Chen. He asked a few simple questions and did not probe into the matter anymore. Zhuo Feng remained as cold as before, paying no attention to Jian Chen. Finally, the 3 days passed. On that day, Jian Chen purposefully asked for a day off and did not go to the mountain top. He stood outside his dwelling, waiting for Mo Tianyun's arrival quietly. Junior, so your dwelling is here. I finally found you. Look at you. Of all the places you could choose for a dwelling, you chose such a remote place, making me spend so much time to find you. And why is it so messy here? There are weeds and bushes everywhere. How can a place like this be a dwelling? At this moment, Biyao flew over from afar slowly whilst being enveloped by radiant saint force. Little junior sister, why have you come? Jian Chen frowned as he looked at Biyao who stood before him. Biyao wrinkled her nose in displeasure. She snorted, what little junior sister? You should be saying senior sister. I've said it in the past. Before your strength has surpassed mine, you're not allowed to call me your little junior sister. Biyao made her way around Jian Chen and stared at him with her large, bright eyes. She said, little junior brother, you have been abnormal in the past few days, and you didn't even go to teacher's class. I worry for you, so I specially came to see you. Thank you for your concern, junior sister, but I'm fine. I plan on entering seclusion, so please return, said Jian Chen before turning around and entering his dwelling. He activated the protective formation and locked Biyao outside. He constantly worried about Shaoling, so he was in no mood to talk to Biyao. Biyao stood outside the dwelling and looked at the entrance that had been enveloped by formations. She pouted with much displeasure as she grumbled quietly, so much for my kind intentions. If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have come to see you. Once Biyao left, Mo Tianyun appeared silently where she was before. With a flash, he passed through Jian Chen's low-level formations and entered the dwelling. Senior Mo Tianyun, can we set off now? Jian Chen immediately gathered his focus when he saw Mo Tianyun. The more time we waste, the more danger Shaoling will be in. Let's not tarry and set off right now, said Mo Tianyun. He grabbed Jian Chen's shoulder with one hand while a simple talisman appeared in the other. After activating the talisman, an energy for teleportation immediately surged out and wrapped around them, causing them to vanish. When Jian Chen reappeared, he had arrived in a large expanse of outer space. He knew he had left the desolate plain now, but he had no idea just how far away he was. Is Senior Mo Tianyun's original body trapped here? Jian Chen thought. The light in his eyes flickered as he studied every inch of the space there, but he failed to find anything in the end. At this moment, the space near them suddenly distorted, and a huge spatial crack suddenly ripped open. Under Jian Chen's watch, a meteor actually flew out. Jian Chen's eyes suddenly narrowed when he saw the meteor because an old man with a sword on his back sat on it. Even though the old man seemed simple, giving off no presence, Jian Chen felt him radiate with a great sense of threat. Unsurprisingly, this person was the solitary sword ancestor. However, Jian Chen had only heard of the solitary sword ancestor before. He had never seen him, so he failed to recognize him. Do the 3 successors satisfy you? Mo Tianyun looked at the solitary sword ancestor seated on the meteor and asked calmly. The solitary sword ancestor's face was bright as he was in high spirits. He was clearly extremely happy. He said in delight, I'm satisfied. I'm satisfied, all right. I'm completely satisfied. I owe you a huge favor for this. You'll be able to return this favor very soon, Mo Tianyun smiled indifferently. Afterwards, he formed a seal with a hand and struck it towards the space before him. Immediately, the calm space began to distort heavily, forming a spatial gate that was several hundred meters across. "Let's go in," Mo Tianyun called to the solitary sword ancestors before striding in with Jian Qin. There was a region of complete void on the other side of the spatial gate. There were no stars and no light. There was only darkness that stretched as far as the eyes could see. The solitary sword ancestor got off his meteor and crossed the distance with a single step. He studied the surroundings and said, "I never would have thought that such a tough miniature world would be hidden here. If I didn't look carefully, I really would have struggled to discover its existence." The solitary sword ancestor looked at Mo Tianyun and said, "Is this where your original body is trapped?" Mo Tianyun nodded. He pointed ahead and said, "You must have sensed the invisible wall up ahead. The invisible wall has formed a tough obstacle that keeps my original body trapped. I only need you to destroy the wall." Jian Qin also looked in front, but he failed to discover anything. Even when he used the senses of his soul, he still found nothing. "It looks like this invisible wall can't be discovered without a certain level of strength," thought Jian Qin. "This invisible wall is as tough as a medium-quality god artifact. With the strength of your original body, getting through this invisible wall is nothing difficult. Why do you need my help?" The solitary sword ancestor studied the invisible wall for a while before asking out of doubt. "It's not as simple as you think it is." "Do it," Mo Tianyun backed up with Jian Qin, pulling very far away from the solitary sword ancestor. The solitary sword ancestor nodded slowly. In the next moment, an extremely powerful sword intent flooded out from his body. The simple sword on his back shone with dazzling light, illuminating the surroundings and purging the darkness like the sun. The solitary sword ancestor wielded the sword and directly stabbed out. The stab was like a streak of light, seemingly skewering the entire region of space. It struck the invisible wall up ahead with terrifying force. That's the power of the major achievement of Sword Sage. "Pay close attention," Mo Tianyun said to Jian Qin softly as he looked at the solitary sword ancestor. "An expert who has reached the major achievement of Sword Sage." Jian Qin was extremely shocked when he heard that. He stared at the old man before him and asked, "Senior Mo Tianyun, who is he?" "He's the solitary sword ancestor who has been searching for you, but he won't be causing any problems for you in the future," Mo Tianyun said easily. At this moment, there was a deafening boom, and with that, scorching flames leaked out, dyeing the entire region of darkness red. The invisible wall shattered from the solitary sword ancestor's attack, but behind the invisible wall, there were flames that burned for all of eternity. They seemed to be able to burn space itself, radiating with terrifying heat. The solitary sword ancestor's face changed when he saw the flames. Immediately, he became much sterner than he had ever been and growled, "This is the Flame Reverend's cosmic formation of the fire-purifying lotus." "Have you been trapped by the Flame Reverend Grand Prime's cosmic formation of the fire-purifying lotus?" "That's right. I've been trapped here for tens of thousands of years now, but the person maintaining the formation isn't the Flame Reverend," said Mo Tianyun. The solitary sword ancestor was stern. He stared deeply at the dazzling, raging fire and said sternly, "If it really was the Flame Reverend, you would not have been able to last until now. However, the cosmic formation of the fire-purifying lotus is not something I can destroy. Just leave what is next to us," said Mo Tianyun before making a gesture to invite the solitary sword ancestor to leave. The solitary sword ancestor knew that Mo Tianyun did not want him to see what happened next, so he did not hesitate either. He nodded and glanced at Jian Qin deeply before leaving. Chapter 22-26, True Chaotic Force, 1. As soon as Jian Qin heard the mention of the Flame Reverend Grand Prime, his attention was raised. He was not unfamiliar with the name of the Flame Reverend Grand Prime. He was a vicious person who dared to move against Grand Exalt in order to become a Grand Exalt. Previously, in the lower world, Jian Qin once saw a projection that he suspected to be the Inata Grand Prime on the 9th floor of the Inata Tower. At the same time, he learned from her that after the Inata Grand Prime had been heavily injured by the greatest expert of the Immortals world, the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt, she tried to return and was ambushed by the Flame Reverend Grand Prime and her disciple, Ta Ji. At that time, the Flame Reverend Grand Prime wanted to take the Anata Grand Prime's comprehension of the laws of fire while she was heavily injured, but in the end, the Flame Reverend underestimated the Anata Grand Prime. He still was not her opponent even when she was heavily injured. In the end, the Anata Grand Prime's disciple, Ta Ji, was personally killed by the Anata Grand Prime, and even the Flame Reverend lost his body to the Anata Grand Prime, fleeing with just his soul. Even now, Jian Shen was not certain whether the projection he saw on the 9th floor of the Anata Tower within the heavenly palace of Bisheng actually came from the Anata Grand Prime, or it was just an act from the artifact spirit. However, there was one thing he was certain about: the Flame Reverend Grand Prime working with Ta Ji to ambush the Anata Grand Prime did take place. Otherwise, as Ta Ji's disciple, Su Ran would not have been drawn into the entire matter and be hunted down for millions of years by the divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bisheng. Senior Mo Tianyun, is this Flame Reverend very powerful? Where even the solitary sword ancestor fears him so much? Jian Shen asked about the Flame Reverend Grand Prime. Mo Tianyun nodded. The Flame Reverend is indeed very powerful. He's one of the handful peak experts of the Saints' world, only a step away from reaching Grand Exalt. However, the Flame Reverend is quite a madman. It's rumored that in order to overcome the final step for his laws of fire, he actually moved against the Anata Grand Prime recklessly. The Anata Grand Prime's strength ranks within the top 3 of the 7 Grand Exalts of the Saints' world. As such, let alone the fact that the Flame Reverend still hadn't taken the final step, even if he did and became a Grand Exalt himself, he still would not have been able to steal the Anata Grand Prime's comprehension. After failing to lay his hands on the Anata Grand Prime, the Flame Reverend Grand Prime then extended his hands towards the Ice Goddess, hoping to find what he needed to take the final step from the Ice Goddess. Jian Chen's heart immediately sank from that. He said sternly, "Looks like the person behind Nan Patian is the Flame Reverend Grand Prime." Mo Tianyun looked at Jian Chen deeply and said, "I know you have a sister from the Tian Yuan continent called Shangyang Mingyue. If you're able to reach out to her somehow, tell her that exact same thing, just in case she's ignorant about the enemy and returns to the Ice Goddess Hall recklessly, right into the enemy's trap before she is powerful enough. Perhaps you can get your sister to go to the heavenly palace of Bisheng." In the past, the First Majesty of the heavenly palace of Bisheng hunted down the Flame Reverend Grand Prime across the entire world and shook up the entire Saints' world. Only when the Flame Reverend Grand Prime hid well, and the First Majesty was no longer able to find his traces, did the hunt come to an end. Jian Shen nodded as his heart became rather heavy. He secretly worried for Fairy Hao Yu, who he had separated with several years ago. As for his sister going to find the First Majesty, he knew that such a matter was impossible because he had heard from Shui Yunlan that his sister had once come into conflict with the First Majesty of the heavenly palace of Bisheng. If the First Majesty learnt about his sister's current state, it would have been fortunate enough if she did not take advantage of the situation, so providing assistance was even more impossible. "Let's do it. I can't find another suitable person for destroying this formation aside from you because there are some secrets that other people cannot learn about." As he said that, Mo Tianyun took out a hand-sized formation disc. The formation disc was bronze in color, and it was covered with countless profound inscription. Every single line of inscription hid the truths of the world, so it seemed like laws intermingling with one another. "I'll cast down this peak-level formation in the surroundings to prevent any presence from leaking out when you fuse the twin swords, just in case some expert of the Saints' world senses it." With a wave of his hand, Mo Tianyun had already cast the formation discs into space and enveloped the surroundings with a huge formation. He was extremely cautious. Jian Shen approached the cosmic formation of the fire-purifying lotus silently, and the sword spirits also appeared above Jian Chen's head at that moment. "Master, have you really made your decision?" The sword spirits asked to confirm one more time. Currently, their illusionary faces were filled with seriousness. They had recovered quite a lot compared to when they were still on the Tian Yuan continent. As they grew stronger, the power they could unleash through the fusion would naturally be greater as well, and the backlash accompanying it would be even more powerful. Even they did not know whether the current Jian Chen could endure the backlash from the fusion. I've already made up my mind. Ziying, Qing Suo, let's start, Jian Chen said with determination. The sword spirits looked at each other and no longer said anything else. In the next moment, the sword spirits shone with intense violet and azure light. They turned into two illusionary swords completely condensed from violet and azure light above Jian Chen's head as powerful sword chi swept out. They seemed to have turned the surroundings into a domain of sword chi. The two swords lacked physical bodies right now, but having a physical body or not made no difference during the fusion because the fusion was Ziying and Qing Suo's powers. It used the vital energies of the sword spirits, supreme yin force and supreme yang force. From chaos came yin and yang. Ziying and Qing Suo sprang into existence from a sliver of supreme yin force and supreme yang force. When their powers fused together, chaos would appear once again. Jian Chen stood below the two swords as he raised his hands over his head and towards the sky, into the two swords conjured from the sword spirits. The chaotic Niden within his dantian revolved wildly as turbulent chaotic force constantly surged out, filling Jian Chen's entire body. He pushed the defenses of his 13th layer chaotic body to the limit before using a combination of his arms and his will to gradually make the vital energies of the sword spirits approach each other. Mo Tianyun stood in the distance as he stared at Jian Chen closely. He was stern. Finally, the powers of the sword spirits were truly fused together under Jian Chen's efforts, becoming whole and creating a completely new power. Immediately, a terrifying pulse of energy that seemed to be responsible for splitting the heavens from the earth erupted. It made the entire space tremble as the intermingling laws all shook uncontrollably. Chapter 22-27, True Chaotic Force, 2. In the instance the chaotic force was created, it surged into Jian Chen's body, immediately causing him to tremble uncontrollably. His face became sheet white, and blood oozed out from the corner of his mouth. Although Jian Chen had reached the major achievement of the chaotic body, and his body was extremely tough, his current chaotic body was still too weak before true chaotic force. Without any exaggeration, his 13th layer chaotic body was no different from a child before the true chaotic force. As a result, he only lasted for a split second under the rampaging of true chaotic force before becoming heavily injured. His organs had been ripped to pieces, reduced to mush at an unbelievable speed by the terrifying destruction of the chaotic force. The white robes that represented his status as a radiant saint master turned blood red at a visible rate. In just a few seconds, the robes had become soaked in blood. At this moment, if it was possible to see through the clothes, it would quite be evident that Jian Chen's body had become cracked like pottery. Bright red chaotic blood oozed out furiously from his wounds. True chaotic force was just too powerful and too terrifying. With a violent presence of destruction, it completely surpassed all other energies in the world. In just a short instance, it shattered Jian Chen's chaotic body, causing him to become more heavily injured than he had ever been. When Mo Tianyun saw this from afar, his heart sank. The power of the chaotic force had completely exceeded his expectations. Don't keep charging up, and do it quick. Otherwise, you'll die from the backlash before you can even deal strike, Mo Tianyun called out from afar. His voice boomed like thunder, causing the space to rumble. Jian Chen heard it clearly. Jian Chen's face twisted in agony as his consciousness flashed before his eyes. Not only did his body have to endure the backlash from the fusion, but even his soul was shaken up drastically. Waves of dizzying pain radiated out from his soul, making Jian Chen feel like his soul was about to be ripped apart. Arg! Jian Chen suddenly bellowed out. He endured with his great willpower, unleashing all the strength within his body to control the chaotic force with his raised arm, swinging it towards the cosmic formation of the fire-purifying lotus. The true chaotic force created from the fusion of the swords turned into an illusionary strand of sword chi in Jian Chen's arms. It shattered space and tore through the laws with an enshrouding light, slicing out with indescribable speed. At this moment, the world seemed to fall silent and be reduced to nothingness. Space was as fragile as glass while the 3,000 laws all bowed down. The chaotic force condensed between Jian Chen's arms seemed to possess the power to judge the world and destroy all. Like a supreme lord, it was unstoppable. During this process, the backlash Jian Chen experienced peaked as well. His face became frighteningly pale as he bled from all his facial orifices. His body trembled violently as layers of blood and flesh vanished from his body at a visible rate. The chaotic force was just too brutal, and the backlash was just too powerful. Before the attack even struck, a portion of Jian Chen's body had been reduced to nothingness. Pop! At this moment, a clear, crisp sound rang out. The chaotic force condensed between Jian Chen's arms finally struck the formation, and the formation that was so powerful that even the solitary sword ancestor was unable to do anything about it seemed as fragile as a bubble. It popped from just the slightest contact. A huge crack was effortlessly ripped in the cosmic formation of the fire-purifying lotus. The interior was clearly visible through the crack as the flames radiated with terrifying heat that was enough to burn space to a crisp, raging for all of eternity. At this moment, a black-robed middle-aged man sat in the formation. He was extremely powerful, where just the surging presence he gave off was enough for stars to tremble and space to disintegrate. He sat in the center of the flames, and a green leaf that was only 2 fingers wide hovered above his head, shining with a faint, green light around him. It kept the roaring flames at bay. The black-robed man seemed exactly the same as the Mo Tianyun that Jian Chen was familiar with. He was Mo Tianyun's original body, having been trapped here for several tens of thousand years. Right when the crack appeared in the formation, the black-robed Mo Tianyun's eyes snapped open. His eyes shone brightly, causing the roaring flames to twist slightly. At the same time, an extremely ancient-looking man sat in another region of the formation in cloth robes. However, Mo Tianyun's original body had to endure the scorching of the flames at all times, while the old man was several dozen meters away, seated at a location where flames did not exist. He was unable to feel any of the heat from the flames. The old man sat in the only safe position in the cosmic formation of the fire-purifying lotus. Suddenly, the old man's eyes snapped open. He stared in the distance with an ugly expression and cried out, "The Flame Reverend's cosmic formation of the fire-purifying lotus has actually been destroyed." "Who has destroyed it?" As he said that, the old man wanted to struggle to his feet, but as soon as he moved, black chains immediately appeared around him, restraining him on the spot. The black chains were condensed from pure and powerful demonic aura. It seeped into the old man's body, restraining him completely. Seeing how he was bound by chains, the old man's face became extremely sunken. The light in his eyes flickered a few times before he suddenly called out, "It doesn't matter who you are. Please leave here immediately and announce to the Saints' world that the Empyrean Demon Lord is someone from both the demons and the immortals' worlds. I don't care what ties you have with the Empyrean Demon Lord, but this is a significant matter. You must bear in mind what situation you stand in. Do not work with the people of the immortals and demons' world and commit a great sin." If the other experts of the Saints' world really did end up hearing the old man's words, they would probably sever all ties with Mo Tianyun after considering their circumstance, even if they had some ties with Mo Tianyun. They might even directly announce this shocking piece of news to the Saints' world, allowing everyone to learn about it. However, the old man had never considered that the person who destroyed the formation would not be an expert of the Saints' world, but someone who was from the immortals' world like Mo Tianyun. Saint of Grand Harmony, don't waste your efforts. You won't have the opportunity to expose my secrets to the Saints' world. At this moment, Mo Tianyun's voice rang out. Demonic aura surged out from around Mo Tianyun as he gave off a presence that was as vast as the starry sky itself. He strode through the flames as if he was walking on the cracks of space and directly arrived before the old man. Now that the formation was destroyed, the roaring flames no longer possessed the same power as before, even though they did not disperse. They were no longer able to trap Mo Tianyun. "Empyrean Demon Lord, the Flame Reverend will never spare you," the old man referred to as the Saint of Grand Harmony stared at Mo Tianyun as he spoke through gritted teeth. He was filled with hatred. The flame reverend has even hidden himself, so would he be bold enough to show himself? Moreover, my bloodline is no weaker than the warring gods of your saint's world. If the flame reverend really does come, why would I fear him? Mo Tianyun said before striking the saint of Grand Harmony's head with his hand. Restrained, the saint of Grand Harmony was unable to fight back at all. His head shattered with that, and his soul was forcefully restrained, gripped in Mo Tianyun's hand. However, the saint of Grand Harmony's soul was extremely extraordinary. It was like a miniature sun, shining with resplendent light. It was an extremely powerful soul. Chapter 22-28, A Fractured Soul. At the same time, there was a meteor that hovered in the vast starry space right outside the desolate plain. From the meteor, the boundless desolate plain seemed to be the size of a fingernail. An azure-robed man sat on the barren meteor. His face was cold while his piercing eyes stared at the huge piece of land that stood silently in the distance. He was the Azure Pen King. The Azure Pen King never left during these days. He had always remained on the meteor, silently watching the desolate plain. He paid attention to Jian Chen at all times, personally watching Jian Chen even if it did not suit his status. In his heart, dealing with Jian Chen was not as simple as taking revenge for Mo Cheng. More importantly, he wanted Jian Chen's Anata Tower. Celestial Sword Saint, I, the Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance, will remember this. Don't you ever let me find the opportunity or I'll, the Azure Pen King said through gritted teeth as heavy killing intent flickered through his piercing gaze. Afterwards, the Azure Pen King spread out his hand. A bright red droplet of blood hovered above it, pulsing with great energy. However, to an expert like the Azure Pen King, this energy was just too puny. The droplet of blood came from Jian Chen. The Azure Pen King used the droplet of chaotic blood to utilize a secret technique and look for Jian Chen's whereabouts. Who knows how many times he had done this already? In reality, during the time he had been waiting there, he would basically look for Jian Chen's whereabouts every day or two in order to keep track of if Jian Chen had left the desolate plain unknowingly through a teleportation formation. However, the Azure Pen King was greatly intrigued after checking this time. His eyes shone brightly as joy filled his face. He suddenly stood up and growled, just as I had expected. You haven't remained on the desolate plain for long. You've finally left. However, since I have a droplet of your blood, you can't escape from me no matter you go as long as you remain in the saint's world. Jian Chen, if you remained on the desolate plain, there really wouldn't have been anything I could do to you, but you've already left now. You're basically looking to die, the Azure Pen King sneered. Then he closed his eyes and used a secret technique to expand his search radius. Very soon, the Azure Pen King opened his eyes. He looked into the depths of space and sneered, you sure have fled far away, but no matter how far you go, you can't avoid my secret technique or being hunted down by me. With a flash of azure light, the Azure Pen King shot off. It seemed like a huge, azure pen flapping its wings, flying into the depths of space with indescribable speed. He vanished in an instant. At this moment, Jian Chen was completely covered in blood after having fused the swords. The backlash severely injured him. And that was not the main problem. Most annoyingly, Jian Chen discovered that once the twin swords had fused, they seemed to have become like magnets, stuck together firmly. Separating them was not easy. However, after dealing out that strike, he clearly did not have much power left. He had basically burnt out of energy now, so separating the swords was an extremely great challenge as well as a race against death. This was because if the swords remained fused, there would only be one fate for him, the same one as the previous master of the twin swords. He would die to the backlash. Jian Chen definitely did not want that to happen. Ziying. Qing Suo. Jian Chen called out for the sword spirits in his heart. He did not know whether the sword spirits could hear his calling. At the same time, determination flooded his eyes, and while gritting his teeth, he began to burn the power of his soul without any hesitation at all. He erupted with his last amount of power, doing all he could to separate the swords. During the process, his organs had completely vanished. Under the rampaging of true chaotic force, it had already been reduced to a bloody pulp. Even a third of his body had been gnawed away. The power of his soul depleted rapidly, almost running out now. Currently, Jian Chen had arrived at the gates of death. But at this moment, an even more horrible matter occurred. The evil power hiding in Jian Chen's soul awakened once again while the power of his soul had been reduced. It wanted to take over Jian Chen's consciousness and thus his body. Jian Chen's heart sank. At such a critical time, if he let the evil power take over and replace him, he would definitely die. There would be no chance of him coming out of this alive. Demonic, red light flickered in Jian Chen's pupils. The world around him gradually became blood red, making him roar out furiously. He utterly hated the evil power in his soul. Whenever his soul was weakened, it would take advantage of the situation and come out to make trouble, to try and replace him. If I really let you replace me in the current situation, I'll be dead for sure. Since you want me to die, I'll make you die right before me, Jian Chen bellowed out. The demonic red light became brighter and brighter in his pupils. Before he lost consciousness, he directed a strand of chaotic force towards his soul. At that moment, Jian Chen could already feel that his consciousness was affected. Although he retained a sliver of clarity, he was near insanity. Otherwise, he would have never done something so wild. After all, the chaotic force he used to cleave at his soul was true chaotic force that was beyond his control. It was extremely powerful. He was basically dead for sure if the power struck his soul. Despite that being the case, Jian Chen still performed such a fatal action without any hesitation when he was about to lose his consciousness. He did not tarry at all, taking action decisively. Like a dagger, a strand of chaotic force sliced into Jian Chen's soul. It headed towards the evil power that had fused with Jian Chen's soul. Jian Chen's soul was like a piece of paper, immediately cut in half effortlessly. Coincidentally, a portion of one half was occupied by the evil power, while the other half completely belonged to Jian Chen. At this moment, the twin swords finally separated. With the fusion released, the rampaging chaotic force vanished in that instance as well as if it had never appeared in the first place. Jian Chen was a bloodied mess. He directly fainted there, losing consciousness completely. The white-robed Mo Tianyun, who had always remained in the distance, arrived before Jian Chen in a flash when he saw this. He took out the various medicines and precious heavenly resources he had prepared beforehand and either smeared it onto Jian Chen's body or directly fed them into his mouth. I never thought that the backlash from the fusion would be so powerful. The sword spirits still have not returned to their peak condition, so the chaotic force they create from fusing isn't the strongest either. Yet Jian Chen still wasn't able to endure it with his level of the chaotic body. The white-robed Mo Tianyun studied Jian Chen injuries sternly. His soul has actually fractured. Suddenly, the white-robed Mo Tianyun's face changed slightly. He murmured, "Why is it so severe? It looks like the fusion of the swords this time has actually caused him harm. I need to use the Saint of Grand Harmony's soul, and only then will his soul be able to recover as soon as possible." To many experts in the saint's world, an injured soul was an extremely difficult matter to deal with. It was very hard to handle. Yet, from how Mo Tianyun acted right now, he did not seem worried at all. He appeared to know exactly what to do. In the next moment, Mo Tianyun's original body emerged from the cosmic formation of the fire-purifying lotus. The Saint of Grand Harmony's soul was still clutched in his hand. The soul shone like a miniature sun, illuminating the space around them. However, the radiance did not last for long. It was swallowed up by surging demonic aura. An extremely turbulent and pure demonic aura surged out from Mo Tianyun's hand, forming a black, demonic flame that enveloped the soul. Immediately, the Saint of Grand Harmony's miserable cries rang out from the black flame. It was as if he was undergoing the world's most painful torture. However, the black-robed Mo Tianyun remained cold to all of this. He studied Jian Chen closely and gradually, and his frown became deeper. Now that his original body was here, he could see things with much greater clarity than his clone. He could see through Jian Chen's ins and outs. Only then did he discover that Jian Chen's injuries were far worse than he had imagined them to be. There's a sliver of chaotic force that lingers in his fractured soul. The chaotic force is destroying his soul right now, and his soul is becoming weaker and weaker. If this continues, he'll only end up dead. But why is there an evil power in one of the halves? The black-robed Mo Tianyun said grimly. As he spoke, the demonic flames in his hand swelled, and he growled, I need to refine the Saint of Grand Harmony's soul as soon as possible. At the same time, his clone took out a pure soul from his space ring and sent it into Jian Chen's forehead. The pure soul was clearly much denser than the pure soul the white-robed Mo Tianyun had originally shown to Jian Chen in the Radiant Saint Hall. Chapter 22-29, Fusing with the Chaotic Force, 1. As soon as the pure soul entered Jian Chen's soul, it dissolved, turning into extremely pure and strong power of the soul. It completely fused with Jian Chen's two halves and rapidly replenishing the parts that had been eaten away. Pure souls were originally used to strengthen the souls of cultivators and make them even more powerful than before, but now that Jian Chen was so injured, the pure soul instead made up for Jian Chen's exhausted power of his soul. With the inclusion of the pure soul, the rate at which the chaotic force ravaged Jian Chen's soul immediately slowed down. The black-robed Mo Tianyun stood beside Jian Chen. As he quickly refined the Saint of Grand Harmony's soul, he paid attention to Jian Chen's situation. The rate at which Jian Chen's soul dispersed slowed down with the addition of the pure soul, but Mo Tianyun's sternness did not lessen. I've earned him some time, but the danger still remains. If the sliver of chaotic force lingering in his soul isn't eliminated, he'll still die in the end, Mo Tianyun said grimly. Although he could temporarily prevent Jian Chen's soul from dispersing completely, there was nothing he could do about the chaotic force. This was because it was true chaotic force. It was not as easy to deal as the half-assed chaotic force cultivated by people with normal chaotic bodies. Moreover, the chaotic force resided in Jian Chen's soul, which was the most fragile part. It will all be up to him now. All I can do, I maintain his soul to the best of my ability, Mo Tianyun said sternly before pouring another pure soul into Jian Chen's soul. And I don't have many pure souls left on me. They're not of particularly high quality either. I can only place my hopes on the Saint of Grand Harmony's soul now. It looks like I need to refine his soul as quickly as possible. Mo Tianyun's eyes narrowed, and he handed 2 pure souls to his clone. Then he sat down where he was and formed seals with his hands, casting down a great formation with space as his surface. The formation was extremely tremendous. It basically filled every inch of the miniature world. Each inscription was extremely thick, and it flickered with black light, surging with demonic flames. The black-robed Mo Tianyun sat in the center of the formation. Countless inscriptions gathered around him as all the demonic flames condensed on him through the operation of the formation, roaring powerfully. Immediately, a tremendous ball of black flames surrounded Mo Tianyun. However, he sat in the flames without moving at all, constantly using secret techniques to refine the Saint of Grand Harmony's soul with the assistance of the formation. A terrifying energy seemed to rampage in the miniature world as Mo Tianyun refined the soul, causing the space that even the solitary sword ancestor praised as tough to distort heavily. Time passed silently. Very soon, the pure souls on Mo Tianyun were completely depleted, having all been poured into Jian Chen's soul. Even though he still had some heavenly resources and pills for the soul, they could not be compared to the pure souls. The Saint of Grand Harmony's soul hasn't been completely refined, but there's nothing I can do now. The black-robed Mo Tianyun sighed from within the demonic flames. The flames in the air suddenly vanished, exposing Mo Tianyun's original body. The Saint of Grand Harmony's soul in his hand had turned into a ball of extremely great power of the soul. However, the power of the soul contained impurities, so it was nowhere near as pure as the pure souls. I hope that the power of the Saint of Grand Harmony's soul can assist you in dispersing the strand of chaotic force. The black-robed Mo Tianyun stared at the unconscious Jian Chen. Under the guidance of his finger, the power of the soul was immediately siphoned away as a hair's breadth stream that constantly channeled into Jian Chen's forehead. The power of the Saint of Grand Harmony's soul was just too powerful for Jian Chen, so Mo Tianyun did not send all of it into Jian Chen's soul at once. Instead, he did so part by part. At that moment, the unconscious Jian Chen felt like he had entered a dream. In the dream, he was extremely weak, so weak that he was powerless to even stand up. A vast ocean existed around him, and he was tossed around by the turbulent waves, almost being swallowed up several times. He refused to die at sea, so there was a strong desire for survival that radiated from the bottom of his soul. Even when he was extremely weak, he still struggled with all that he had, just to live. During this time, energy of unknown origins had been poured into his body, allowing him to gain some power, but before the turbulent seas, it was still extremely puny, not enough for him to put up a struggle. Gradually, his power became weaker and weaker as he struggled more and more to survive before the terrifying waves. It was as if he would be completely swallowed up before long. However, even in such a despairing situation, Jian Chen did not give at all. He did not feel any fear towards death. There was only a stubborn willpower that originated from the depths of his subconsciousness that made him keep going painfully. It was as if his subconsciousness was telling him that he would not die, or that he would not die here at the very least. At this moment, a tremendous and seemingly unending power suddenly surged forth. In that instance, Jian Chen felt like he was filled with power, so he began to swim in the ocean without any hesitation at all. He did not know where the shore was, nor did he know when he could finish swimming. He did not even know how long he could last. That was because his thinking capacity was basically reduced to a minimum. All of his actions and behaviors were based on instinct. He swam more and more, but the energy remained unending. After who knows how long, he suddenly felt a wondrous feeling as if the region he had swum past became a part of him. He could blurrily sense the region and control it. At that moment, he suddenly discovered that he had already swum across half of the ocean unknowingly. His actions did not stop. He continued to swim forward. He was like an explorer, claiming the land wherever he passed by. Chapter 2230, Fusing with the Chaotic Force, 2. Finally, when he claimed half of the vast ocean as his territory, Jian Chen quivered in his wondrous state, and countless memories surged out like a flood. In that instance, he recovered his consciousness and remembered everything. This is true chaotic force. Jian Chen instantly understood. This was no ocean. This was clearly the strand of lingering true chaotic force in his soul that had almost claimed his life. It's Senior Mo Tianyun who saved me. Jian Chen immediately sensed the situation of the outside world after recovering his consciousness. At the same time, he sensed an extremely great power of the soul to enter his soul from Mo Tianyun's hand. It was exactly this energy that allowed his soul to put up a fight against the chaotic force. At the same time, Jian Chen sensed his other half of his soul. The evil power had occupied most of his other half. There was also a sliver of true chaotic force in there. However, his control over the other half did not seem to be as great. It felt like he was gradually losing control over the other half of his soul. But right now, the danger Jian Chen faced still had not been completely dealt with. He was in no condition to think about the situation of the other soul. Immediately, he dismissed his thoughts and devoted himself to fending off the strand of chaotic force in his soul. A tiny portion of chaotic force has actually fused with my soul. Only at this moment did Jian Chen discover that his soul was different from before. A tiny sliver of chaotic force had unbelievably fused with his soul, allowing his soul to reach a whole new level of strength compared to before, even though it was still very frail. If his soul was like a rock before, his soul had now become steel. It was a transformation in terms of quality. This discovery made Jian Chen both surprised and joyful, but also slightly worried. He did not know whether there would be any side effects from fusing with the chaotic force, but he could clearly sense the increase in strength. Whatever. It's not like I can do anything about it now. Since my soul has already fused with a portion of the true chaotic force, I might as well refine the rest of the chaotic force in a single sitting as well, thought Jian Shen. He made up his mind and began to fuse with the other portion of chaotic force forcefully. During the process, the power of Jian Shen's soul depleted at an extremely rapid rate. If he was alone, he definitely would not have been able to do this because his soul was not that powerful. Fortunately, he had Mo Tianyun's assistance. Mo Tianyun siphoned the power of the Saint of Grand Harmony's soul into Jian Shen's soul, providing abundant support. As a result, Jian Shen was able to do something like that. Unbelievable. It's truly inconceivable. His soul has actually fused with a strand of chaotic force. This is beyond imagination. The black-robed Mo Tianyun stared at Jian Shen without blinking at all. What happened with Jian Shen at this moment left him tongue-tied. The soul is the most fragile part of living beings. Once it has been contaminated with chaotic force, it's almost certain death. Even if someone somehow manages to survive, they would have to pay an unimaginable price. Fusing with chaotic force is even more impossible because even grand exalts can't do something like that. Yet, Jian Shen did it. This child is truly extraordinary. It looks like there was a reason why the sword spirits chose him after all. Mo Tianyun looked at Jian Shen deeply and with thought. After recovering his consciousness, Jian Shen was no longer as frail as he was before in his battle against the chaotic force. Gradually, he gained the upper hand, and the remaining chaotic force in his soul was rapidly devoured, refined, and fused with, allowing his soul to wander off in a completely unknown direction bit by bit. The power of the soul from outside isn't extremely pure. There are some impurities. If I don't do something about it and let these impurities into my soul, it'll become a horrible problem, Jian Shen thought. Suddenly, he remembered his other half that was occupied by the evil power. Immediately, he separated the impure power of the soul, feeding it to the other half. The other half of his soul was contaminated by the evil power anyway, so contaminating it some more did not matter. He just did not want any problematic side effects to happen to the pure half of his soul that belonged to him. Time passed silently, and after who knows how long, Jian Shen finally opened his eyes. One of his eyes was blood red. It flickered with a demonic, red light as an evil power lurked within, while his other eye remained normal. Thank you for your assistance, Senior. Jian Shen stood up and bowed towards Mo Tianyun. But in the next moment, his body began to spasm as he immediately paled. Only now did he realize that although he had just survived a crisis, keeping his soul intact, his body was still severely injured. His movements had aggravated his injuries, leading to excruciating pain. Although Mo Tianyun had worked on his body somewhat, he had only stabilized Jian Shen's condition. He did not recover at all. The black-robed Mo Tianyun stared at Jian Shen. His piercing gaze seemed to see through all of Jian Shen's ins and outs. He said, "What's up with your soul? Your soul has been sliced into two, so you should have died, yet you're still able to act like nothing has happened. I have never heard or seen something like this in my life." Jian Shen shook his head. "I don't know either. None of this was under my control. It's just that right now, my control over the other half of my soul is becoming weaker and weaker." Mo Tianyun nodded. He stared at Jian Shen in thought and only said after a while, "I'd say I have some accomplishments with research on the soul, but what has happened with you has completely exceeded my boundary of understanding. As a result, I cannot help you at all. However, the other half of your soul has been severely contaminated. You need to abandon it or refine it into a clone. However, your control over that other half is becoming weaker and weaker. This is not good. You must find a way to deal with it." "Junior understands," Jian Shen clasped his fist. When he glanced past the white-robed and black-robed Mo Tianyun, a strange expression appeared on his face. This was because he had suddenly discovered he was able to gain a blurry sense of both the white-robed and the black-robed Mo Tianyun's strength. He did not know the exact cultivation level of Mo Tianyun's original body and clone. He only found that whether it was the original body or clone, they were all existences that towered like mountains in his eyes, so powerful that they were undefeatable. In particular, Mo Tianyun's original body filled Jian Chen with surprise and dread. I never thought I'd gain such an ability after fusing with the chaotic force. However, I can sense that the changes with my soul definitely aren't just that. I must spend some time and look into it in the future, thought Jian Chen. He was overjoyed. With such an ability, would it mean that no one would be able to hide their strength from him anymore? Suddenly, the space in the distance cracked, and a huge spatial crack appeared. With a flash of azure light, a middle-aged man in azure robes had appeared near the crack. The Azure Peking. Jian Chen's face changed when he caught a glance of the azure-robed man. In the past, he had only sensed the power of the Azure Peking from the latter's presence alone. He had no idea exactly how powerful the Azure Peking was, but now, he could clearly sense the Azure Pengking's strength. Although he did not know which heavenly layer the Azure Pengking had reached, his strength also filled Jian Chen with surprise and dread. Chapter 2231, Mo Tianyun's strength. The Azure Pengking was so powerful that in Jian Chen's eyes, he seemed like an unscalable, towering mountain. Before the Azure Pengking, Jian Chen could not fight back at all with his current strength. He could not even flee. However, Jian Chen remained extremely composed even though the Azure Pengking had come for him. He glanced at the black-robed Mo Tianyun beside him. He knew extremely well that Mo Tianyun's original body was far more powerful than the Azure Pengking. As soon as the Azure Pengking entered the miniature world, he discovered Jian Chen immediately. He could not help but have his emotions become elated. However, this elation only lasted for a split second before suddenly vanishing. Clearly, he had discovered Mo Tianyun. He did not pay attention to the white-robed Mo Tianyun. Instead, he suddenly looked at the black-robed Mo Tianyun and immediately became stern. He felt an intense threat from the black-robed Mo Tianyun, where he could not help but shiver from the depths of his heart. Although he could not tell what level of cultivation the black-robed Mo Tianyun possessed, the feeling that this Mo Tianyun gave him was even more terrifying than the celestial sword saint. Is this his original body? The Azure Pengking was secretly surprised. His urge to charge over and forcefully kill Jian Chen had been suppressed as well. He stood where he was, clasping his fist towards Mo Tianyun. He was about to say something. But right at that moment, demonic aura suddenly erupted. The black-robed Mo Tianyun had taken action. Endless demonic aura surged from his body, condensing into the huge head of a demon. The head attempted to swallow the Azure Pengking with its gaping mouth. Immediately, the space there trembled violently. The abnormally tough miniature world cracked slightly from Mo Tianyun's attack. Jian Chen, who stood beside Mo Tianyun, became completely immobilized in the instant Mo Tianyun struck out. He had been firmly restrained there by an invisible force. He knew that Mo Tianyun was not targeting him. It was just that the attack was too powerful. The terrifying energy compressed space, affecting the entire region. The compressed space turned into a form of restraint against him. Jian Chen was astounded. Only when Mo Tianyun struck out did Jian Chen truly understand just how powerful he actually was. As for the Azure Pengking, his expression changed drastically. His eyes narrowed significantly as an extremely bright azure light shone from his body. Under the azure light, he turned into an Azure Peng only 30 meters in width. The Azure Pengking did not choose to take on the demon's head. Instead, he flapped his wings and turned into a streak of azure light, avoiding it by a hair's breadth with his extreme speed. However, what made the Azure Pengking frown was that the demonic head also made a turn and continued to pursue him. "Sir, what are you trying to do?" The Azure Pengking growled. He deeply understood that Mo Tianyun's strike was extraordinary. He dared not take it on forcefully. Instead, he used his advantage and unleashed his speed, dodging it with great agility. You sure are bold to chase him to this place, the black-robed Mo Tianyun said coldly. He stared at the Azure Pen King emotionlessly and reached out with his right hand. Immediately, great powers of slaughter condensed, forming a spear that shot directly towards the Azure Pen King with terrifying laws of slaughter. As soon as the spear shot out, it tore through space and time, arriving before the Azure Pen King in an instant. Distance was completely insignificant before it. The Azure Pen King's face changed drastically. At that critical moment, he used his wings to form a shield before him. Every single azure feather flickered with dazzling light as they radiated with terrifying ripples of energy. Spurt. However, the spear condensed from the laws of destruction easily pierced through the Azure Pen King's feathers. Then it punched through his body without slowing down at all. The Azure Pen King grunted. In the next moment, he suddenly vanished, having left the miniature world as quickly as possible. He unleashed his full speed, turning into a streak of azure light that shot into the depths of space in a single instance. The black-robed Mo Tianyun pursued. The demonic aura around him surged, condensing into a black bridge beneath him. The bridge stretched on endlessly, right into the very depths of space. In the next moment, he stepped on the bridge and vanished instantly. Senior Mo Tianyun's strength has actually reached such a level. Even the Azure Pen King can't withstand a single blow from him. Jian Chen felt extremely shocked after witnessing this in person. It had a great impact on him. The Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance is someone known for being difficult to deal with. Since you've caught his eyes, you need to be careful in the future because he will never give up on someone once he has been offended by them so easily unless they are so powerful that there's nothing he can do, the white-robed Mo Tianyun said to Jian Chen sternly. If that's the case, aren't you afraid that the Azure Pen King will cause you problems in the future now that you've attacked him, Senior Mo Tianyun? Jian Chen asked in concern. The white-robed Mo Tianyun chuckled. I'll have nothing to do with the Saints' world very soon, so what trouble can he cause? Moreover, he doesn't have the strength to deal with me. At this moment, the bridge condensed from endless demonic aura appeared again. The black-robed Mo Tianyun returned. He said, the Azure Pen King's speed truly is unmatched. Even I can't stop him if he wants to escape. However, I've managed to take back your droplet of chaotic blood. As Mo Tianyun spoke, he passed a droplet of blood to Jian Chen. He continued, the Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance has been able to find you every time because of this droplet of blood. Now that it has been returned to you, it won't be easy for him to find you again in the future. Thank you, Senior Mo Tianyun. Jian Chen clasped his hand gratefully. Immediately, he absorbed the chaotic blood and also felt very relieved inside. Finally, he did not have to worry about the Azure Pen King finding him at any and all times. Once the Azure Pen King was unable to find him, the threat he posed would be greatly reduced. I need to go to the Cloud Plane immediately. This talisman can directly take you back to the Radiant Saint Hall on the Desolate Plain. You're on your own now. Mo Tianyun passed a simple talisman to Jian Chen before taking out a mask after some slight hesitation. He said, this mask was something I used long ago. It'll be very effective at hiding your identity if you wear it. Even Grand Primes will struggle to see through you in a single glance. Now that the news of the Inata Tower being on you has been leaked, many experts will come looking for you in the future. They'll probably come to the Desolate Plain before long, and even the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bisheng might come personally. Although this mask won't be enough to fool peak experts like the First Majesty, it'll be enough to trick the other Grand Primes. Chapter 2232, Half a Soul. There are some pills for healing the soul in this space ring as well as some other pills that can heal your wounds. You need to recover as soon as possible so that you are ready to face danger at any time in the future, as I won't be able to help you at all times in the future. Mo Tianyun passed a space ring to Jian Chen before looking at the remaining half of the power of the Saint of Grand Harmony's soul. He said, I still haven't refined the power of this soul completely. Having you absorb too much of it will only lead to endless problems. As a result, I'll be taking it with me first. Once I refine it into a pure soul, I'll gift it to you to make it up to you. Mo Tianyun warned Jianchen seriously before leaving. His clone and original body left together. In the blink of an eye, only Jianchen remained within the tough miniature world. However, Jianchen was in no hurry to leave. To him, this extremely obscure miniature world was a rare, safe place. It could not be compared to the Radiant Saint Hall. Jianchen stowed away the return talisman before sitting down. He began to inspect every single difference with his body carefully. Although a lot of the power of my soul has been drained, and it's still extremely frail, it has grown far, far too much in strength. Moreover, I feel like my ability to sense the laws of the world has strengthened by quite a lot after fusing with the chaotic force. It should be quite easier to comprehend the laws of the world in the future. It's just that the half the evil power has occupied will be rather troublesome. It was first contaminated by the evil power before being filled with a large number of memory shards and impure power of the soul. As a result, this half has become messier and is breaking free from my control. Whatever. I'll find a way to deal with the other half of the soul slowly. My priority is to heal my wounds, thought Jianchen. Immediately, he opened the space ring Mo Tianyun had given him. As expected, the space ring contained many bottles of god-tier pills as well as a few heavenly resources organized into neat piles. Every single heavenly resource and pill had its name and usage detailed. They're actually all god-tier pills and heavenly resources. Jianchen was surprised by the grades of the pills and heavenly resources. Mo Tianyun was truly on another level of extravagance. If the news of all the items in the space ring made it out, he did not doubt at all that it would lead to bloodshed between many primordial realm experts. Afterwards, Jianchen immediately ingested the pills and heavenly resources to heal his wounds. The wounds to his soul were the most severe. His soul had been split in half, which was equivalent to losing half of the power of his soul. It would have a great impact on his strength. As a result, there was only one method for him to recover the power of his soul completely, and that was through foreign assistance. My body actually heals much more slowly than before. Jianchen frowned slightly, but that vanished very soon. He could clearly sense that after being ravaged by true chaotic force, his chaotic body had clearly become tougher than before. As a result, it healed much more slowly than before. After half a month, Jianchen managed to heal his body completely after ingesting many god-tier pills. Now that his body was at its peak condition once again, Jianchen gained an even clearer understanding of the toughness of his body. At that moment, he even gained the impression that his chaotic body had already reached the 14th layer. That was because his chaotic body was far, far more powerful than before. However, the part of the soul the evil power occupied suddenly began to tremble violently. It gave off a powerful sense of resistance, wanting to break free from Jianchen's restraint. Jianchen's face suddenly changed. Before he could closely observe his strengthened chaotic body, he gathered all his strength to suppress that half. You're my soul, yet you want to resist me now. What is this situation? Jianchen was perplexed as he suppressed it with his full strength. Not only did he have no idea what was happening with his body, but even many knowledgeable primordial realm experts would not be able to explain it. Immediately, Jianchen studied the other half of his soul carefully. He attempted to invade the half with his will, but he encountered full resistance. Suddenly, Jianchen was shocked. Disbelief filled his face as he called out inside, "The other half of my soul has actually developed some self-consciousness. How is this possible?" Jianchen felt rather dazed when he saw the reality before him. He stared at the other half of his soul blankly as he found it unbelievable and difficult to accept. This was a part of his soul, yet it had developed self-consciousness. This completely defied logic and surpassed Jianchen's boundary of understanding. At this moment, the other half of his soul the evil power occupied broke free from Jianchen's restraint and fled from his head, charging out of the miniature world as quickly as possible. You're a part of my soul, so don't you dare escape from me," Jian-Chen snorted coldly and directly pursued. However, the blood-red soul that the evil power occupied suddenly gave off a strange pulse and disappeared under Jian-Chen's watch. It was no longer present. Jian-Chen was stunned. He stared at where the half had vanished with a sunken face as he remained silent for a long time. It had actually managed to vanish right before him through some kind of method, which he, despite being the owner of the soul fragment, had no idea about. Everything that transpired before him allowed him to gather that something he could not understand had happened to the half of his soul the evil power occupied. Now, it had completely broken free from his control. I've actually lost half my soul. Jian-Chen's face became very ugly. That soul fragment was equivalent to half of his entire soul. Now that he had lost half of it, he felt like he was no longer complete. Most importantly, he felt a sense of dizziness the moment the soul fragment escaped from his body. Clearly, losing half of his soul affected him drastically. One day, I will get you back. No matter what happens to you, you're still mine, Jian-Chen growled. With a flip of his hand, he took out a jade bottle and downed all of the pills in there. He needed to strengthen the remaining half of his soul as soon as possible. Chapter 2233. The snowfall peaked. The number of pills that Mo Tianyun had left for Jian-Chen reduced with every passing day, but after ingesting so many pills, the recovery of Jian-Chen's soul was extremely evident. The remaining half of his soul basically strengthened every single day, replenishing the depleted power of the soul at an extremely rapid rate. After who knows how long, Jian-Chen, who had remained seated in the miniature world like a statue, finally stopped healing. At that moment, he slowly opened his eyes. However, the moment he opened his eyes, they became extremely deep. His pupils seemed to have become two bottomless holes, where a glance at them would make one feel like their soul would be drawn away into the endless darkness. Jian-Chen did not detect what had happened in that instance. With the changes to his eyes, the most evident thing he discovered was that the surroundings, the world, and even the universe seemed different from before. He was unable to explain exactly how it was different. It was just a feeling that he experienced after the strand of true chaotic force had fused with his soul. It was an indescribable sensation, truly profound. The power of my soul has recovered, but my soul is only half in size now. If I want to fill the missing half, it'll almost be impossible unless I recovered the other half. Jian-Chen stood up and stared off into the depths of space. His feelings were mixed. After he recovered the power of his soul, he sensed a blurry connection with the other half of his soul. He could roughly feel its current location, and he could even sense it moving at high speeds. However, Jian-Chen also knew that the other half of his soul had developed its own self-consciousness. As he sensed its location, it could also sense his location, which was why it was definitely impossible if he wanted to retrieve the other half alone. Let alone the fact that the other half was extremely distant from him right now, but as long as it sensed him approach it, he believed it would flee far away. Sigh, Jian-Chen exhaled gently. He no longer paid any more attention to the other half. Instead, he wore Mo Tianyun's mask. The mask was extremely extraordinary. As soon as he put it on, he felt like a faint, mysterious power had surrounded him. This power was extremely difficult to detect. If it were not for the changes to his soul from the chaotic force, he probably would not have been able to sense the mysterious power even when wearing the mask. Jian-Chen controlled the mask so that it morphed into Chang Yang's appearance before taking out the simple talisman he had received from Mo Tianyun. He activated the talisman, and its power took him away. When Jian-Chen appeared again, he had already returned to his dwelling in the Radiant Saint Hall on the desolate plain. It was exactly the same location where he had left with Mo Tianyun. However, as soon as he returned to his dwelling, Jian-Chen frowned. His dwelling was completely different from when he left. The flat ground of the dwelling was covered in soil and rocks now. The smooth walls in the surroundings also possessed many uneven nooks and crannies. Currently, his dwelling seemed like a mess. It did not seem like a habitable place at all. Even the simple formations he had cast down at the entrance of the dwelling had been destroyed. Half of the entrance had collapsed. Jian Shen looked at his messy dwelling calmly. However, the coldness in his eyes revealed that he was definitely not as calm as he seemed on the surface. This was his dwelling, where he cultivated alone. From a certain sense, it was also his home. Yet someone had reduced it to such a messy state. It was impossible for him to be in a good mood. Jian Shen made his way out of the dwelling silently. He did not use the senses of his soul. Instead, his powerful senses had already discovered Biyao, who was making her way towards his dwelling. Jian Shen's soul was no longer complete, but it was far more powerful than before. Before he had left with Mo Tianyun, he only needed to use the senses of his soul, and he could detect any changes on the mountain and find Han Xian who was cultivating. But now, he had no need to use the senses of his soul. His 5 normal senses alone were enough to detect anything that happened on the mountain. He could even directly find where Han Xian was. Moreover, he could clearly sense that Han Xian's presence was weak. He was quite injured, currently healing in his dwelling at the top of the mountain. Ah! Little junior brother, you're back? Biyao flew over while being surrounded by milky white radiant saint force. As soon as she arrived outside Jian Chen's dwelling, she discovered Jian Chen with a single glance. She could not help but cry out immediately. Little junior sister, what has happened during the time I was gone? And what's up with your wounds? Who injured you? Jian Chen looked at Biyao and asked calmly. Little junior brother, how did you tell that I was injured? Biyao stared at Jian Chen in surprise. She had already recovered over 90% of her injuries, so it did not affect her at all. She was confident that she had recovered to a point where even her teacher, Han Xian, was unable to tell that she was injured. Despite this being the case, her junior who was weaker than her discovered it from a single glance. Naturally, Biyao was surprised. Tell me what happened, Jian Chen kept asking. Biyao became gloomy from that. Her pretty face was filled with a sense of being wronged. She said, it's all because of the disciples from the Snowfall Peak. The Lord of our Soaring Clouds Peak, the teacher, had some grievances with the Lord of the Snowfall Peak. A few days ago, the Lord of the Snowfall Peak came to make trouble on our Soaring Clouds Peak, injuring our teacher in battle. After the teacher was injured, the disciples of the Snowfall Peak came to provoke our Soaring Clouds Peak time and time again. They challenged Senior Zhuofeng and me. If we did not accept, they would throw various verbal abuses at us. Senior Zhuofeng and I could not stand it, so we could only accept the challenges. In the end, we were harassed by the disciples of the Snowfall Peak. Biyao's eyes became slightly red and puffy when she reached there. When she thought about the abuse she had suffered from the disciples of the Snowfall Peak, she was filled with grievance. After harassing Senior Brother and me, they still were not satisfied. They basically searched through the entire mountain peak and found your dwelling after much difficulty. They wanted to force you out, but fortunately, you were not in your dwelling, or you'd probably suffer a fate even worse than Senior Brother. Senior Brother was very injured. Even though he had a 3-colored soul core, it still took him a rather long time to recover. They went easier on me, so my wounds were lighter. The Snowfall Peak. Jian Shen stood with his arms crossed as he listened to Biyao narrate the entire matter. A cold light flickered through his eyes as he growled, "How many are there, and what are their strength?" There are a total of 5 disciples from the Snowfall Peak. I heard that the most powerful one has already been with the Radiant Saint Hall for 200 years. He has a 4-colored soul core and has already comprehended the laws of the Hallowed, becoming a Hallowed Saint Master. He's the first senior of the Snowfall Peak. However, the first senior did not come. The ones doing the harassing were led by their second senior brother, said Biyao. Chapter 2234, The Provocation. What's the cultivation of the second senior brother? Jian Chen continued to ask. The second senior of the Snowfall Peak is the same as Senior Zhuofeng. He also has a 3-colored soul core, but he has already touched on the basics of the laws of the hallowed, so he's slightly more powerful than Senior Zhuofeng, said Biyao. Jian Chen nodded slightly. The battle prowess of Radiant Saint Masters was very weak. Even if they grasped the Radiant Arts, it was impossible for them to be particularly powerful. A Radiant Saint Master with a 3-colored soul core was definitely not the opponent of a Hallowed Saint Master with a 2-colored soul core. Since the second senior of the Snowfall Peak had touched on the basics of the laws of the Hallowed, he was indeed not someone Zhuofeng could deal with. At this moment, Jian Chen glanced at the foot of the mountain and pointed at the distance. Are they from the Snowfall Peak? Biyao's heart leapt in surprise when she heard that. Immediately, she looked towards where Jian Chen was pointing at, and her face changed drastically. She said in a rather frantic manner, "It's them. It's them. The people from the Snowfall Peak are going overboard. They've actually come again. Junior brother, they've come to make trouble. They want to purposefully harass us who are weaker. Hide quick. Don't let them find you. I'll go find senior brother right now." Before Biyao could finish speaking, she had already rushed off in a panic to find Zhuofeng. After Biyao had left, Jian Chen sat down on a boulder nearby and purposefully allowed his presence to radiate. At this moment, 4 young men in white robes that signified their identity as Radiant Saint Masters were surrounded by a layer of milky white light at the foot of the mountain. They talked and laughed along the way, steadily flying just slightly higher than the mountain itself. The 4 young men were disciples of the Snowfall Peak. The person who led them was a handsome man who seemed to be 25 or 26. However, when he glanced past the territory that belonged to the Soaring Clouds Peak, arrogance filled his face. The young man was the second senior of the Snowfall Peak, Wensheng. He had brought his 3 junior brothers with him as he glanced across the Soaring Clouds Peak like he was inspecting it. He acted like the territory that belonged to Han Xian was his own. The 3 disciples under Protector Han really aren't anything special at all. I heard that person called Zhuofeng was even a 5-star genius, yet he was still unable to withstand a single strike from second senior brother, though that Biyao really does have an extraordinary appearance. Whether it's her face or her body shape, it is all basically perfect. It's impossible to find any flaws. Honestly, only someone pretty like that is worthy of serving second senior brother, that's right. Second senior brother, with your background, it's nothing difficult for you to subdue Biyao. The 3 junior brothers of the Snowfall Peak constantly sucked up to Wensheng from behind, trying to ingratiate themselves with him. As for Wensheng, he seemed to enjoy this very much. He smiled arrogantly and said confidently, "Don't worry. This Biyao won't be able to escape from my hands. She'll yield to me sooner or later. A mere protector Han Xian can't protect her." Wensheng spoke arrogantly. He did not take the protectors of the Radiant Saint Hall seriously at all. Of course. With second senior brother's background, let alone the mere protectors of the Radiant Saint Hall, but even the people on par with elders in the Sacred Hall probably dare not offend you, the 3 junior brothers said. Wensheng smiled indifferently and did not try to deny that fact. Just when he was about to say something else, his eyes suddenly narrowed, and he looked in another direction. The direction happened to be an extremely remote region of the Soaring Clouds Peak, a place where very few people set foot in. Yet Wensheng stared in that direction. The light in his eyes flickered as he gradually began to smile mysteriously. It should be that person called Changyang. He was lucky last time. When we found his dwelling, he had already hidden himself, so we failed to find him. However, I'd like to see where you hide this time. Changyang? The second senior brother of the Soaring Clouds Peak? Let's head over there. I'd like to see the coward of the Soaring Clouds Peak. The 4 disciples smiled and changed their direction, directly flying towards Jian Chen's dwelling. Biyao, who had always paid attention to their movements, naturally discovered that they were approaching Jian Chen's dwelling. Immediately, her heart tightened, and she rushed off to Zhuofeng's dwelling. Senior brother, something bad has happened. The people from the Snowfall Peak have come to our Soaring Clouds Peak again. They're heading towards junior brother's dwelling. Senior, let's go help junior brother, Biyao called out from outside of Zhuo Feng's dwelling in a panic. Chang Yang, that coward that only knows how to hide, has returned? Zhuo Feng's voice rang out from the dwelling. Senior brother, you must be mistaken. Junior brother is definitely not someone like that. Maybe junior brother just happened to be out when the people from the Snowfall Peak came to cause trouble, Biyao argued for Jian Chen. Zhuo Feng snorted coldly, junior sister, you're far too naive. You may know him, but you'll never understand his true nature. Don't get caught up in his appearance. Perhaps it's exactly because Chang Yang learnt we were not as powerful as the Snowfall Peak that he hid. Perhaps Chang Yang already knew something like this would happen the moment he joined our Soaring Clouds Peak, so he set up a dwelling in an extremely remote region so that he would have a path of retreat. Junior sister, go back. I look down on someone as cowardly as Chang Yang from the bottom of my heart. Even if I had the power to help him, I would never help someone like Chang Yang. And you shouldn't go to Chang Yang's dwelling anymore. He has no right to be my junior, nor does he have the right to be your second senior brother. Forget about him. Treat him like he doesn't exist. Zhuo Feng spoke firmly, leaving no room for discussion. Senior brother, we all have the same teacher, so how can you be so merciless? Whatever. If you're not going, I'm going, Biyao said furiously and left. At this moment, the 4 disciples of the Snowfall Peak led by Wen Cheng had already arrived near Jian Chen's dwelling. They saw Jian Chen with a single glance as he sat on a boulder. Currently, he was surrounded by a milky white light, seemingly in the midst of cultivation. He's Chang Yang? He's actually cultivating outside. The environment outside is extremely complicated. In a situation where he gets frightened, he'll suffer from cultivation deviation, and he can't blame anyone else for it. Wen Qing sneered when he saw the cultivating Jian Chen before glancing at the people behind him. A one-colored soul core radiant saint master behind him understood. He sniggered before directly casting a radiant arte, condensing a sword from radiant saint force that shot towards the boulder beneath Jian Chen. Boom! The rock under Jian Chen was blasted to pieces in an explosion. Wen Cheng and his lackeys all stared at Jian Chen closely. They wanted to see whether Jian Chen would suddenly be frightened during his cultivation and suffer from cultivation deviation, or perhaps he would suffer from a backlash from the Radiant Saint Force and be reduced to a miserable state. The cultivation of Radiant Saint Masters differed greatly from fighters. They condensed the pure Radiant Saint Force origin energy in the surroundings and fused it with the soul core in their heads. The head was where the soul resided, so it was the friendliest place. As a result, if they suffered some overly great stimulation or were frightened, it could easily lead to a loss of control over the Radiant Saint Force in the soul core, leading to cultivation deviation. Chapter 2235. I'll give you an explanation, but to the disappointment of Wen Cheng and the others, they did not see what they wanted. They did not see Jian Chen fall to the ground when the rock crumbled. Instead, he remained at the same height as he shone with a holy light. He was completely unaffected. Even the dust that had been kicked up was stopped by the layer of gentle light around Jian Chen, preventing him from being contaminated. Wen Cheng immediately frowned when he saw this. The behavior of the second senior of the Soaring Clouds Peak was different from what he had expected. At this moment, the Radiant Saint Force around Jian Chen gradually dispersed. He opened his eyes and looked at Wen Cheng's group with a cold gaze. He growled, forcefully interfering with someone's cultivation will lead to severe consequences. Unless you have irreconcilable grievances with someone, no one ever does that in the saints' world. Once someone forcefully interferes with someone else's cultivation, grievances will develop even when there were none in the beginning. Moreover, it will be a great grievance. Jian Chen's voice was icy cold and firm. The Radiant Saint Master who shattered the rock under Jian Chen sneered, "Really? Then doesn't that mean there's a huge grievance between us now?" Out of the 5 disciples of the Snowfall Peak, he was the Radiant Saint Master who had joined most recently. He also had a one-colored soul core, but he did not take Jian Chen seriously at all. He provoked, "You must be the second senior of the Soaring Clouds Peak, Chang Yang, right? But Changyang, now that we already have grievances between us, a huge grievance as a matter of fact, what are you going to do? Jian Chen stood with his arms crossed 20 meters away from Wen Cheng's group. His white robes were not contaminated by anything as he said, there have been many people who have developed grievances with me due to various reasons, but many of them are already dead. They died under my hands. Jian Chen spoke calmly, but his voice was filled with a frigid coldness. Jian Chen did not take the disciples of Snowfall Peak too seriously in the beginning, but he happened to overhear everything that they had said as they made their way over. That was because something had happened to Jian Chen's soul, boosting his senses to an unbelievable level. Nothing that happened on the soaring cloud's peak could escape from his senses. Whether it was Wen Cheng's words, the conversation between Biyao and Zhuo Feng, or even Han Xian who was healing in seclusion, he was able to sense it all clearly. Including Wen Cheng, the disciples of the Snowfall Peak were all surprised. However, they were not frightened. After being surprised, they laughed aloud. They looked at Jian Chen like they were looking at a fool. I've seen arrogance, but never have I seen something like this. Where did the courage come from for someone with a one-colored soul core to say such confident words? Who does he think he is? Even second senior brother isn't bold enough to say something as arrogant as that. Is he just ignorant, unaware of the dangers that he faces? His enemies before were probably mortals who had never cultivated before. Dealing with those ordinary people with his strength as a Class 9 Radiant Saint Master is indeed a piece of cake. Ha 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 ha, the disciples of the Snowfall Peak all scoffed. They were not afraid of Jian Chen's threats at all. Fifth junior brother, looks like you've accidentally offended a problematic person, the second senior of the Snowfall Peak, Wen Cheng, sniggered at Jian Chen strangely as he looked at Jian Chen. The fifth junior brother sniggered as well. He said, it looks like this person really is someone who I can't afford to offend, but my greatest flaw is that I'm not afraid of trouble, so the more I can't afford to offend him, the more I want to offend him. With that, the fifth junior brother immediately controlled Radiant Saint Force and arrived before Jian Chen in a flash. Milky white light covered his hand as he directly slapped it towards Jian Chen's face. Being slapped in the face was the most humiliating thing that could happen to someone. Clearly, the fifth junior brother did not plan on showing Jian Chen any respect, using this vicious method right from the start to humiliate Jian Chen. Jian Chen's eyes turned cold. He remained there without moving at all and raised his hand as well. Covered by a layer of Radiant Saint Force, he slapped out even faster than the fifth junior brother. Slap. With a crisp sound, Jian Chen's slap hit the fifth junior brother before his hand even approached Jian Chen. The strike landed firmly on his face. It sent him flying. Wen Cheng and the two other disciples were dumbfounded when they saw this. They watched their fifth junior brother get knocked over a dozen meters away. All of their faces became blank. The fifth junior brother of the Snowfall Peak scrambled to his feet in horrible shape. His snow-white robes were covered in soil while half of his face had been reduced to a bloody mess. His teeth had completely shattered, and he glared at Jian Chen with bloodshot eyes. Why, you coward! How dare you slap me? I want to kill you. The fifth junior brother of the Snowfall Peak was furious. Humiliation filled him as his gaze towards Jian Chen became filled with killing intent. Afterwards, he charged at Jian Chen like he was insane. He used his radiant arts to attack Jian Chen with his full strength. Jian Chen sneered and also used radiant arts to receive the attacks. Even though the strength he displayed was at the level of a one-colored soul core, his battle prowess had completely exceeded the one-colored soul core. Even without using the laws of the hallowed, the fifth junior brother was not his opponent. Slap. With another crisp sound, Jian Chen's hand landed on the other half of the fifth junior brother's face, sending him flying once again. The fifth junior brother of the Snowfall Peak cried out miserably. Clearly, the slap this time was far more powerful than the previous one. Not only did it reduce his entire face to a bloody mess, but he was even stunned by it. He slipped in and out of unconsciousness. Stop. Don't you dare, Changyang. Only now did Wen Cheng and the others return to their senses. They were utterly furious as they roared out angrily. Two of them directly charged towards Jian Chen. No one's allowed to bully my junior brother. This is the territory of our Soaring Clouds Peak, not your Snowfall Peak. If you want to make trouble here, I'll get teacher to teach you a lesson. At this moment, Biyao, who heard what happened here, hurried over from afar. Before she even arrived, she had already called out. Biyao was filled with panic. She knew that Jian Chen had only reached the one-colored soul core recently. He was a bottom feeder among Radiant Saint Masters with one-colored soul cores with that level of cultivation, yet even the weakest disciple of the Snowfall Peak had been a Radiant Saint Master with a one-colored soul core for longer than him. As a result, she believed that Jian Chen would be the one to suffer if conflict happened between them. Hearing Biyao's cries, the two Radiant Saint Masters who charged towards Jian Chen in an attempt to punish him forcefully halted themselves. They were not afraid of Han Xian. Instead, they thought about a rule where stronger disciples were not allowed to attack weaker disciples. The two of them both had two-colored soul cores. If they attacked a disciple with a one-colored soul core here, it would be breaking the rules of the Radiant Saint Hall. They would suffer severe punishments. It was exactly because of that the person who shattered the rock beneath Jian Chen earlier was their weakest fifth junior brother, who also had a one-colored soul core. However, when they saw their disfigured fifth junior brother and heard Biyao's cry, the disciples all revealed extremely interesting expressions. Biyao arrived before Jian Chen with lightning speed. At first, she studied him carefully, and she only sighed in relief when she saw that he was fine. Afterwards, she stood in front of him with her smaller body and said, "Junior brother, don't be scared. Senior sister is here. Senior sister will never let them bully you. Changyang, I want to kill you." At this moment, the dizzy fifth junior brother of the Snowfall Peak climbed to his feet. After finding where Jian Chen was standing with great difficulty, he called out furiously in a slurred voice and charged over with bloodshot eyes. However, as soon as he took a few steps, he felt the world around him spin. He staggered and fell over. When Biyao, who had run over in a hurry to protect Jian Chen, saw the disfigured fifth junior brother, she was completely dazed. She had no idea what had happened. "Junior brother, what happened?" Biyao pointed at the fifth junior brother and asked Jian Chen. What else can happen? The Changyang of your Soaring Clouds Peak has injured a disciple of our Snowfall Peak to such a degree. Our Snowfall Peak will definitely be seeking an explanation from your Soaring Clouds Peak, the third disciple of the Snowfall Peak, Lian Yan, said sternly. His expression was extremely ugly. What did you say? The Lu Qingbing of your Snowfall Peak has been beaten up like this by my junior brother? Biyao was taken away. Disbelief filled her face. You don't say. Aside from Changyang, who else could it be? Lian Yan said furiously. He did not take the Soaring Clouds Peak seriously at all. You want an explanation? All right, I'll give you an explanation. Jian Chen took a step forward and said emotionlessly. Chapter 2236. The Fight in the Ring. You're called Lian Yan, right? Lian Yan, third disciple of the Snowfall Peak, I formally challenge you to a battle. Will you accept? Jian Chen called out. Jian Chen's words immediately stunned the people present. A Radiant Saint Master who had just condensed a one-colored soul core was actually challenging a Radiant Saint Master with a two-colored soul core to a battle? Moreover, the Radiant Saint Master with the two-colored soul core had broken through many years ago, having consolidated his cultivation long ago. Where did his confidence come from? Junior brother, don't do that. You've only just broken through to one-colored soul core recently. You still haven't consolidated your cultivation, so don't fight with Lian Yan. Biyao tried her best to convince Jian Chen. After hesitating slightly, she whispered in Jian Chen's ear, this Lian Yan is very powerful. He can't be compared to Lu Qingbin at all. Your senior sister couldn't defeat him even with her two-colored soul core and was injured instead. Junior brother, listen to me. You can't fight Lian Yan no matter what happens. Since junior sister's wounds come from Lian Yan, there's even more reason why I can't spare him. I'm the second senior brother of the Soaring Clouds Peak after all, said Jian Chen. You're still arguing with me at a time like this. Biyao was angered as soon as she heard Jian Chen refer to her as his junior sister. He was clearly weaker than her, yet he had become his senior. This had always made Biyao very conflicted inside. Lian Yan, I will be waiting for you in the ring on the sky-gazing peak. Jian Chen ignored Biyao. After saying this to Lian Yan coldly, he flew towards the sky-gazing peak while surrounded by light. There were rules within the Radiant Saint Hall. They did not interfere with spars between disciples of the same level, but once stronger disciples wanted to attack weaker disciples, they would be breaking the rules. It was forbidden. However, these weaker disciples could challenge those stronger disciples. You sure are arrogant. Do you really think you have the right to fight against me just because you've defeated 5th junior brother? I'll go with you then. I'll show you that the power of the two-colored soul core is not something your puny one-colored soul core can rival. On the other hand, Lian Yan sneered, flying behind Jian Chen. There were many mountains around the Radiant Saint Hall. All hallowed Saint Masters who had reached a level equivalent to God King would be bestowed a mountain as their territory, and they would become protectors of the Radiant Saint Hall. However, there were also larger and smaller mountains. The Soaring Clouds Peak and the Snowfall Peak were of the type that could not raise any attention at all. The Sky-Gazing Peak was one of the 99 main peaks of the Radiant Saint Hall. It led close to 100 peaks nearby, including the Soaring Clouds Peak and Snowfall Peak. The Sky-Gazing Peak was not as quiet as the Soaring Clouds Peak, which only had Han Xian and the 3 disciples. As one of the 99 main peaks, the Sky-Gazing Peak possessed businesses and entertainment, so it was extremely lively. The Radiant Saint Masters from various other peaks roamed on the Sky-Gazing Peak. People hurried about constantly on the huge square. Jian Chen had already understood all the rules of the Radiant Saint Hall, so as soon as he arrived on the Sky-Gazing Peak, he directly made his way towards a ring. He stood in the ring leisurely and called out, "Disciple of the Soaring Clouds Peak, Chang Yang, with a one-colored soul core, would like to challenge Lian Yan of the Snowfall Peak who has a two-colored soul core." What? A one-colored soul core Radiant Saint Master is challenging a two-colored soul core Radiant Saint Master? That's a battle of different levels. It's quite rare. The one-colored soul core and two-colored soul core are equivalent to receival and returnants for fighters. They're an entire cultivation realm apart, so where is this guy getting his confidence from? Is he a 7-star genius or beyond? If he is a 7-star genius, he really might possess the strength to defeat a two-colored soul core Radiant Saint Master with just a one-colored soul core. Jian Chen's voice attracted a lot of attention. Immediately, many Radiant Saint Masters gathered in from the surroundings. All of them cast surprised gazes at Jian Chen. These Radiant Saint Masters were rather weak. Most of them had one-colored or two-colored soul cores. Very few people with 3-colored soul cores paid attention. As a result, when Lian Yan arrived here, over 100 Radiant Saint Masters from various peaks had gathered around the ring. Seeing Jian Chen standing there leisurely and the Radiant Saint Master in the surroundings, Lian Yan's expression sank slightly. He seemed to understand Jian Chen's intentions now. Even if he defeated Jian Chen before everyone, it would bring him no glory at all. After all, it was expected for a two-colored soul core Radiant Saint Master to defeat a one-colored soul core Radiant Saint Master. But on the other hand, if he was defeated, it would not be as simple as a failure for him. "Junior brother, you have to be careful." Biyao followed Lian Yan closely and arrived here as well. She called out in concern at Jian Chen. "Who's Lian Yan? Hurry up and get in the ring and defeat him. You can't lose to a one-colored soul core disciple with your two-colored soul core. Otherwise, that would be truly humiliating." At the same time, a few interested Radiant Saint Master called out from around the ring. Lian Yan snorted coldly and looked at Jian Chen venomously. He sneered before entering the ring as well. Not only will I achieve a beautiful victory, but I will also make Chang Yang pay a heavy price. I will return 5th Junior's humiliation by tenfold. Lien Yen secretly made up his mind. He stared at Jian Chen coldly and said, Chang Yang, do it. I'd like to see what you're capable of. Jian Chen smiled strangely when he heard that. He cut to the chase and condensed a sword from Radiant Saint Force, shooting it at Lien Yen. That's a basic Radiant Arte, the Radiant Sword. He's dreaming for sure if he wants to defeat a two-colored Soul Core Radiant Saint Master with just a Radiant Sword. A few two-colored Soul Core Radiant Saint Masters gave their opinions. Lien Yen sneered when he saw Jian Chen use the basic Radiant Arte. He thought, with my cultivation as a two-colored Soul Core, the Radiant Sword I cast definitely won't be something you can fend off with your one-colored Soul Core. With a thought, Lien Yen condensed a Radiant Sword from Radiant Saint Force as well and shot it out. On the surface, his Radiant Sword did seem much more powerful than Jian Chen's. Boom! Just as expected, as soon as the two Radiant Swords collided, Jian Chen's Radiant Sword exploded loudly, having been destroyed by Lien Yan's Radiant Sword. It dispersed in the surroundings as dense Radiant Saint Force. Lien Yan's Radiant Sword continued onwards without slowing down, shooting towards Jian Chen as a strand of white light. Be careful, junior brother. Biyao called out in a panic from the surroundings. She was extremely nervous. He has gained the upper hand right from the start. It looks like the person called Chang Yang has already lost. A one-colored Soul Core is still a one-colored Soul Core. The difference is extraordinary. Losing is nothing strange, indeed. If he won, it would be strange, many Radiant Saint Masters discussed around the ring. They did not find this outcome to be surprising. 3rd Junior, you have to properly teach Chang Yang a lesson. You need to show him how ignorant he is, Wen Qing called out from outside the ring. His gaze towards Jian Chen was also icy cold. Jian Chen was not surprised at all. He smiled mysteriously, and just as the Radiant Sword was going to hit him, Radiant Saint Force surged behind him. Immediately, he condensed a pair of snow-white wings. With a slight flutter, he left behind an afterimage and dodged the Radiant Saint with great composure. He charged right towards Lien Yen. It's the Radiant Wings that can temporarily boost speed. But how can he move so quickly with them? What speed? Even I didn't see it properly. How can he reach such speeds with the Radiant Wings? He's 2 or 3 times faster than when I use the Radiant Wings. How did he achieve this? Cries immediately rang out in the surroundings. Biyao, who had always been worrying for Jian Chen, also became stunned when she saw the speed Jian Chen had unleashed through the Radiant Wings. She covered her mouth and was left speechless. This was because even she was unable to achieve Jian Chen's speed after casting the Radiant Wings. As Jian Chen charged over with the Radiant Wings, he suddenly extended a finger towards Lien Yen gently. With that gesture, the Radiant Saint Force from the dispersed Radiant Sword immediately condensed rapidly. It turned into a white band of light, tying up Lien Yen completely under his stupefied gaze. At the same time, Jian Chen arrived before Lien Yen with his Radiant Wings. He lifted his hand and directly swung it towards Lien Yan's left cheek. Slap. With a crisp sound, Lien Yen was knocked away by a slap just like his 5th Junior. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.